Tonight, I invite you to walk, very slowly, to a bamboo forest growing on a mountainside, where the wind sings through the hollow stalks, and an old man plays a simple flute that brings tears to the eyes of anyone who hears it. In this story, you will accompany a famous musician who had everything and yet felt empty, until he discovered that the emptiness he so feared was, in reality, the source of all beauty. Through his journey, you will learn to let go of the need to stand out, to stop clinging to what others think of you, and to rest in the humble stillness of the present. Let these gentle words release the tension of the day, calm your mind, and quiet your breath, allowing your body to gently drift into a deep and restorative sleep. You don't have to be anyone tonight, prove anything, or achieve anything. Just listen, let go, and rest. If these stories help you find peace and sleep better, please subscribe to the channel. BUDDHIST for sleep, to accompany you each night on your journey towards peace. In the great lowland city, where palace rooftops gleamed in the sun and streets teemed with people, lived a musician whose name everyone knew. His name was Kaoru, and he was, so they said, the greatest flautist who had ever lived. From childhood, he had shown an extraordinary talent for music. Her fingers moved across the flute with a speed and precision that left listeners speechless. She could play the most difficult melodies without a single mistake, embellish them with dazzling flourishes, reach soaring notes, and sustain them without her breath faltering. At noble banquets, at wealthy merchants' parties, in the grand halls where the city's important people gathered, Kaoru played, and everyone applauded. Everyone praised her skill, and everyone said they had never heard anyone play with such mastery. Kaoru lived for those cheers, lived to see the astonished faces of the audience, to hear the praise, to receive the gifts and honors that rained down on him after each performance. Every time he played, he felt a feeling akin to happiness swell within him, the thrill of being admired, of being the best, of being unique. He dressed in the finest clothes, was accompanied by servants, and walked the streets with his head held high, savoring the recognizable glances of those who pointed him out as they passed and murmured his name. He was famous, he was rich, he was admired, he had everything a man could desire, and yet, deep in his heart, Kaoru felt empty. It was a strange emptiness, one he couldn't name and didn't dare face. It always appeared in moments of silence, when the applause ended and he was left alone. It would appear at night, when he turned off the lamps in his luxurious house and lay down on his bed. And in the darkness, with no audience to admire him, no one to applaud him, he would suddenly feel a profound desolation, a sensation that, beneath all his fame and all his mastery, there was nothing, as if he himself were a beautiful, hollow shell, a shining ornament on the outside and empty on the inside. And that emptiness terrified him. It terrified him so much that he did everything he could to suppress it. He played more, performed more, sought more applause, more praise, more admiration, trying to fill the unbearable silence within him with the noise of fame. Moreover, he had begun to realize something that deeply troubled him, though he didn't dare fully admit it either. His music, however perfect it was, however dazzling his technique, didn't truly move anyone. People applauded his skill, yes. They admired his ability, his flourishes, his speed. They said how well he played, what agile fingers, what mastery. But no one, ever, had cried while listening to him. No one had closed their eyes and trembled to their very soul. No one had ever left one of his performances saying that the music had touched their heart, that it had changed something inside them, that they had felt something genuine. They admired him, but he didn't move them. And deep down, even though he denied it, Karu knew that his music, like himself, was brilliant on the outside and hollow on the inside. It was then that he first heard about the old man of the mountain. It happened one afternoon in the city market. A traveler who had come from distant lands was telling an amazing story to a group of people. He said that on his journey, he had passed through a remote village at the foot of a mountain, and that there, in the town square, he had met an old mendicant monk, a poor, ragged man with a straw hat covering his face, playing a simple bamboo flute, one of those rustic flutes made from a simple hollow reed. The old man didn't play complicated melodies, the traveler said. He didn't do any flourishes or show off. He played simply, almost clumsily by the city standards. Long, spaced-out notes with long silences between them. And yet, the traveler insisted, his eyes still shining at the memory, that simple music possessed something he had never heard from any famous musician in any city. Upon hearing it, the people in the square had gradually fallen silent, then stopped, then drawn closer, and in the end, the traveler recounted, everyone, rough men, weary women, old people, children, had fallen silent, their eyes filled with tears, deeply moved by those simple notes of an old bamboo flute played by a nameless beggar. I've never felt anything like it, the traveler finished. I don't know how I did it. It wasn't technique, it wasn't skill. It was something else, as if the old man weren't playing the flute, but as if the flute were playing something much greater than himself through him. As if in those simple notes there was all the pain and all the beauty and all the peace of the entire world. I can't explain it. I only know that I cried, and that we all cried, and that I'll never forget that sound. Kauru, who was listening from the side without anyone noticing her presence, felt something twist inside her. At first, there was disbelief, an old beggar with a rustic cane, moving people to tears, when he, the great Koru, the world's greatest flautist, with all his mastery, had never achieved that. Then there was contempt. The traveler was probably exaggerating. Those ignorant villagers were probably easily moved. But beneath the disbelief and contempt, deeper than both, lay something else. One thing Koru didn't want to admit, but which burned in his chest. A fierce envy and a desperate longing. That old man had something he didn't. That old man possessed the secret of music that touched the soul. The secret that had eluded him all his life, no matter how much mastery he accumulated. And Koru wanted it. He wanted it with all the strength of his empty heart. He wanted that secret that moved people to tears. He wanted that power. He wanted that true music to possess it, to master it, to finally be not only the most admired, but also the most loved, the one that would touch the soul of everyone who heard it. That very night, Kauru made a decision. She would find out where that mountain was. He would find the old beggar with the bamboo flute, and he would wrest his secret from him, whatever the cost. He didn't yet know, as he made his plans, with a heart full of longing and envy, that the secret he was going to seek was not a technique that could be learned, nor a trick that could be copied, nor a power that could be stolen. He didn't know that this journey wouldn't fill him with new talent, but rather empty him of everything he thought he was. He didn't know that, to find the true music he so longed for, he would first have to lose his name, his fame, his pride, and even the very idea he had of himself. He didn't know, but the journey that would change everything was about to begin. It took him several weeks to find the old man's whereabouts. He asked travelers, merchants, and pilgrims, describing the beggar monk with the bamboo flute, and little by little he gathered the clues. He learned that the old man didn't always live in the same place, that sometimes he wandered the roads playing his flute in exchange for a handful of rice, but that he had a place he always returned to, a humble hut high atop a distant mountain, in the middle of a vast bamboo forest, where he spent most of the year in solitude. And it was toward that mountain that Koru set off, leaving behind the city, fame and applause, with a single thought fixed in his mind: to find the old man and wrest his secret from him. The journey was long and arduous, and for Koru, accustomed to the comforts of the city, it became unbearable. He walked for days along dusty roads, slept in humble inns that seemed beneath him, and ate coarse food he despised. He constantly complained of the heat, the cold, the weariness, the bad food, and the roughness of the road. But he pressed on, driven by his eagerness, because envy and the desire to possess that secret were stronger than all his discomforts. Finally, one afternoon, he reached the foot of the mountain and began to climb a narrow path that led into a vast bamboo forest. And as he entered that forest, something, much to his dismay, began to change in his mood. He had never seen a place like it. Bamboo stalks rose up around him by the thousands, towering, slender, and a luminous green, so close together that their canopies formed a canopy through which the sunlight filtered in shimmering golden rays. The ground was covered with dry leaves that crunched softly under his feet, and all around him, enveloping him, was a sound Kauru had never heard before, the sound of the wind through the bamboo, for when the breeze blew through the hollow reeds, they produced a soft, mysterious murmur, a whisper that rose and fell, a sound that seemed both music and silence, as if the entire forest were an immense instrument played by invisible hands. Kauru paused for a moment, overcome against his will by that sound, and for an instant, just an instant, the consuming hunger subsided, and something in his chest opened to the serene beauty of that whispering forest. But then he shook his head, composed himself, and continued climbing. He hadn't come all this way to admire bamboo. He had come to find the old man, and he found it at dusk. The path led to a small clearing in the middle of the forest, where there was a very humble hut, made of bamboo canes and a thatched roof, barely a shelter from the rain. In front of the hut, sitting on the ground on a threadbare mat, was an old man. He wore a patched and faded habit. Beside him, on the ground, lay a straw hat and a beggar's bowl, and in his hands, resting on his knees, he held a simple, crude bamboo flute, made from a single hollow reed, exactly as the traveller had described it. The old man stood very still, his eyes half closed, seemingly listening to the rustling of the wind through the bamboo, so absorbed in the sound that he showed no sign of noticing Karu's arrival. Karu approached and stood before the old man. After so many weeks of travel, after so much effort, he finally stood before the man who possessed the secret he so desperately craved. He felt his heart race. "Is that you?" he asked, without bowing, in the haughty tone he was used to. "The monk who plays the bamboo flute, the one who makes people cry with his music." The old man slowly opened his eyes and fixed them on Koru. They were serene, deep, ageless eyes. Eyes that seemed to look without judgment, without desire, without fear. She contemplated the newcomer for a moment, his fine clothes covered with dust from the road, his proud bearing, his anxious face, and a faint smile touched her lips. "Do I play a bamboo flute?" "Yes," he replied in a calm voice. "As for making people cry, I don't make anyone cry. If someone cries when they hear me, It's not because of what I do, but because of something they already had inside and didn't know about. I'm just blowing into a hollow reed. And who are you, lad, climbing such a high mountain in such haste? I am Kauru, said the musician, hoping to see on the old man's face the recognition and admiration that this name inspired everywhere. Kauru, the flautist. Surely you have heard of me. I am the finest flautist in the lowlands. I play in the palaces of nobles and in the halls of the wealthiest. Everyone admires my skill. No one plays the flute like me. The old man looked at him with the same serenity as before, his name and words not disturbing the calm of his face in the slightest. Ah, he said simply. Well, you must play very well. And nothing more. No admiration, no wonder, no irreverence. Just that calm, almost indifferent well. Kauru was bewildered. He was used to his name opening every door, to people showering him with praise upon meeting him, and this old beggar looked at him as if he didn't care, as if the great Kauru was no more important than any other lost traveler in the mountains. She felt a pang of irritation, but she suppressed it, because she needed something from that man. I've come from very far away to find you, he said, trying to appear humble, though pride oozed from every word. I've heard that your music moves those who hear it, that it makes people cry, that it touches the soul. I, with all my skill, have never achieved that. My music amazes, but it doesn't move anyone, and I've come to learn your secret. Teach me to play like you. Show me what you do to move people. I will pay you whatever you ask. I will give you gold, riches, whatever you want. Just tell me your secret. The old man listened, and when he finished, he remained silent for a long, challenging moment, looking at him with those serene and penetrating eyes. Then, very slowly, he shook his head. There's no secret to teach, boy, he said. And even if there were, it's not something you can buy with gold or learn like a melody. What you're looking for isn't a technique. You say you already have all the technique in the world, and it hasn't done you any good. What you're looking for is something else, and that something else isn't added. It's taken away. What is taken away? Kauru repeated, not understanding. My name is Bayan, the old man said, not answering his question. I live here, in the bamboo forest, alone, for many years. I have no disciples, nor do I seek them. I do not teach, because there is nothing I can give that you do not already have. But I see in your face a great thirst and a great emptiness, greater than you yourself know. And I see that you have climbed a very high mountain, driven by that thirst. So I will tell you this. If you truly want to find what you seek, you may stay, but not for me to teach you, but so that the forest and the bamboo and the wind and the silence may unteach you everything you think you know. Because the problem, Kauru, isn't that you're lacking something. The problem is that you're too full. Kauru frowned, equally annoyed and confused. This was not at all what he had expected. He had come to be taught, to add a new power to his mastery, and the old man was talking to him about taking away, emptying, unlearning. He was about to reply haughtily, to tell that ignorant beggar that he didn't know who he was talking to, that he, Kauru, had nothing to unlearn. But he held back, because beneath his wounded pride, something in the old man's words had touched a raw nerve. A great emptiness, greater than you yourself know. How had he seen him? How had that old man, in a few moments, perceived the emptiness he so carefully concealed? The emptiness he himself didn't dare look at. He felt a chill, a mixture of fear and hope. Perhaps, after all, that strange man did know something he needed. I'll stay, she finally said, swallowing her pride. I'll stay and do as you say, even if I don't understand why. Bayana slowly felt this, and a spark of kindness shone in her eyes. "Okay," he said, "then let's start with the first thing. And the first thing tonight isn't playing. It's about resting and eating some rice and listening to the wind through the bamboo. Come, there's room in the hut, even though it's humble, much humbler than your fine clothes are used to. And tomorrow, at dawn, we'll begin to empty your cup, even though you don't yet know what that means." And with those words, the old man slowly rose, took his flute and bowl, and invited Koru into the humble hut, while all around them in the twilight, the entire forest continued to whisper its endless music, that music no one played, yet which had been playing, soft and mysterious, since long before Karu was born, and which would continue to play long after he was gone. The next morning, Karu awoke with the first light. He had slept poorly on a hard mat laid on the hut floor, so different from his soft bed in the city, and his body ached and his spirit was irritated. He went out into the clearing and found Bayan sitting by a small fire, over which water was boiling in a blackened iron kettle. The old man greeted him calmly and invited him to sit opposite him. "First of all," Bayan said, "let's have some tea." Koru sat down, still in a bad mood, impatient to finally begin the real teachings, the technique, the secret for which he had climbed the mountain. Bayan, unhurriedly, took 2 rough, uneven clay bowls, very different from the fine porcelain Karu was used to. He placed one in front of the musician. Then she lifted the teapot and began pouring the hot tea into Karu's bowl. The steaming liquid slowly filled the bowl, reaching about halfway. It rose 3/4 full. It reached almost to the brim. Karu hoped the old man would stop pouring, as anyone would, but Bayan kept pouring. The tea reached the rim of the bowl, and the old man kept pouring. The tea began to overflow, spilling down the sides of the bowl, spreading across the mat, and dripping onto the floor. And yet, calmly, without flinching, Bayan continued pouring, and the tea kept overflowing, soaking everything. "Stop! Stop!" exclaimed Karu, stepping back so the hot tea wouldn't wet her clothes. "What are you doing? The bowl is full. It's overflowing. There's no more room. Don't you see it?" Only then did Bayan stop pouring, set the teapot down, and look at Karu with profound serenity and a very slight smile. "Yes," she said softly, "I see it. The bowl is full. It's overflowing. There's not a single drop more room. No matter how much tea rains down, it won't fill the bowl, because the bowl is already full. It just wastes and makes everything dirty." He paused, and his eyes rested on Koru with a calm intensity. "You are like this bowl, Koru," he said. "You come to me brimming with your mastery, your fame, your pride, your ideas about music, your opinions on how to play and how not to play, the certainty that you are the best, everything you think you know. You are so full that there isn't room for even a single drop of anything new. And you want me to teach you. But how can I teach you? How can I pour anything new into you when you're already full to the brim? Everything I give you will spill over, be wasted, slide off without entering, just like the tea slipping off this overflowing bowl. Before you can learn anything, my boy, you have to empty your cup. You have to let go of everything you think you know, everything you think you are, so that there's an empty space inside you where something new can finally enter." Karu looked at the overflowing bowl, and the tea spilled on the mat, and understood, much to her dismay, the old man's lesson. But her pride immediately resisted. "But my mastery, my technique, my knowledge of music," she protested. "Aren't they valuable? I've spent my whole life perfecting them. They are what have made me the best. How can I let them go? Why would I empty myself of what I have worked so hard to fill? Because that very thing you filled with so much effort, Bayan replied, is what now prevents you from receiving what you seek. Listen carefully, Karu, because this is important. I'm not saying your technique is worthless. Your technique is admirable. Your fingers are agile. Your breath is steady. Your knowledge of melodies is vast. All of that is real, and I'm not asking you to forget it or destroy it, but you've made a mistake that almost everyone who achieves mastery makes. You've confused technique with music. You've believed that the more you filled your cup with skill, flourishes, difficulty, and brilliance, the greater your music would be. And it's just the opposite. The technique is just the bowl. The real music isn't the bowl. It's the empty space inside the bowl. The space that can hold something. A bowl filled to the brim with clay, however beautiful the clay may be, cannot hold you. A bowl is only useful, only fulfills its true purpose, when it's empty inside. And you, my boy, have filled your bowl so much with technique and pride that there's no room left inside you for true music. That's why you amaze, but you don't move anyone. Because in your music, there is much glittering clay and very little empty space, and it is from empty space, and only from it, that everything that stirs the soul is born. Karu remained silent, her heart racing. Those words clashed head-on with everything he had believed his entire life. His whole life he had tried to fill himself with skill, fame, admiration. And now that old man was telling him that his fullness was precisely his emptiness, and that the emptiness he so feared was precisely what he needed. It was disconcerting, almost an affront to his pride, and yet something deep within him, that secret emptiness he carried inside and had never been able to fill no matter how hard he tried. That emptiness trembled upon hearing the old man's words, as if recognizing in them a truth he had always sensed without daring to look at it. "Look at the bamboo," Bayan said then, pointing to the surrounding forest. "Look at the reeds. Ah, why do you think we use bamboo and not solid oak or pine to make flutes? Why does bamboo make a sound and not a solid piece of wood?" Karu looked at the tall, green bamboo stalks and pondered. "Because bamboo is hollow inside," he replied. "It has an empty channel that runs the entire length of the cane, and that's why Corexis makes noise." "Exactly," Bayan said, and his smile widened. "Bamboo makes noise because it observes. If it was solid inside like a thick stick, it wouldn't make a sound, no matter how hard you blew on it. It's its inner emptiness, its hollowness, that allows it to sing. Music doesn't live in the solid part of the bamboo, in the cane, in the wood. Music lives in the void, in the emptiness, in the space of nothingness that runs through the kodan from within. Without that emptiness, there is no music possible. And Asquin with you too, kid. As long as you're full inside, solid with pride, technique, and ego, you can't truly sound. Only when you empty yourself, only when you become hollow like bamboo, can the breath of life pass through you and become music that touches the soul. Hollow bamboo is your teacher, Karu. Learn from it, empty yourself, and make it sound. That morning, sitting across from the old man, with the overflowing bowl of tea spilled before him and the bamboo forest whispering all around, Karu felt he was beginning to understand, very vaguely, very timidly, why he had climbed that mountain. He hadn't gone there to fill himself with new power as he had believed. He had gone there to empty himself, to learn the art, far more difficult than any technique, of becoming hollow. And though his pride resisted with all its might, though a part of him wanted to gather his luggage and run back to the city, to the applause, to comfort, to the comforting illusion of being full, another part deeper and truer, knew that he had finally arrived where he was meant to be. And that part, the part of him that was tired of being a shiny, hollow shell, the part that secretly longed for true music and a true life, that part decided to stay and empty its cup and learn from the bamboo. Kaoru hoped that, after the T-bowl lesson, the flute lessons would finally begin. He imagined himself sitting next to the old man, learning those simple, mysterious notes that moved people, discovering the trick, the secret technique, the way of playing that touched the soul. But when he asked Bayan to teach him that morning, the old man shook his head. "Not yet. You're not going to play yet. Before you learn to play, you have to learn to listen. And you, kid, even though you've been making music all your life, you don't know how to listen. You know how to play, you know how to make sounds, but you don't know how to listen. And whoever doesn't know how to listen can't make real music, because real music isn't born from playing, but from listening. So this is what you'll be doing for the next few days. You will go to the forest, sit among the bamboo, and listen. Nothing more. You will not take a flute. You will not play. You will simply sit and listen to the wind through the reeds and the silence between the sounds. You will listen until you learn to truly listen. And only then, when you know how to listen, will we talk about playing." Kaoru was stunned. Sitting in the forest listening to the wind, doing nothing, not even playing. It seemed absurd to him, a waste of time, almost a mockery. He was the best flautist in the world, and this old man was telling him to sit on the ground and listen to the wind blow like an idle child. He was about to protest, but he remembered the lesson of the bowl and bit his tongue, and with his pride tight in his throat, he obeyed. He went into the bamboo forest, found a quiet spot among the reeds, sat down on the ground, on the dry leaves, and settled down to listen. At first he didn't hear much, the whisper of the wind through the bamboo. Yes, that soft murmur that had impressed him upon his arrival. The occasional crackle of one reed brushing against another, the distant song of a bird. But his mind wouldn't stay still. He was bored. He was impatient. He thought about the city, about the applause he was missing, about how ridiculous it was to be sitting there doing nothing. She pondered the secret she had come seeking and wondered when the true teachings would begin. Her body was in the forest, listening, but her mind was 1,000 places at once, chattering endlessly, filled with judgments, desires, and impatience. And this inner chatter was so loud that she could barely hear the forest. He spent the whole morning like this, and returned to the hut frustrated and in a bad mood. "I haven't heard anything special," Abayan told him rather petulantly, "just the wind. I've been sitting all morning listening to the wind blowing through the reeds. I don't understand what I'm supposed to learn from that." "You've heard the wind," Abayan said calmly, "but you haven't listened to it. Hearing is easy. Sounds reach your ears on their own, without you doing anything. But listening is something else entirely. Listening is being so present, so attentive, so empty of everything else, that the sound fills you completely, that there is no longer any separation between you and what you hear. Tell me, this morning, while you were listening to the wind, where was your mind?" Kaoru hesitated, embarrassed. "In many places," he admitted. "In the city, in the applause, in the impatience, in asking me when you would really start teaching me." "There you have it," said the old man. "Your mind was everywhere but in the forest. That's why you heard the wind, but didn't listen to it. Tomorrow, when you sit down again, try something different. Don't strain to listen, gritting your teeth, like you do with everything else. Just let go. Let go of the city. Let go of the applause. Let go of impatience. Let go of the question of when the teachings will begin. Let go of everything and be empty, and let the sound of the forest enter you and fill you. Don't listen to learn something. Don't listen to get anywhere. He listened simply for the sake of listening, like someone plunging into cool water on a hot day, with no other purpose than the pleasure of being in it. The next day, Kauru returned to the forest and tried again. He sat among the bamboo, and this time he tried to quiet the chatter in his mind. It wasn't easy. As soon as I let go of one thought, another would appear. As soon as I silenced my impatience, boredom would arise. Her mind was like a restless monkey, leaping from branch to branch, unable to stay still. But little by little, as the hours passed, something began to settle. The chatter didn't disappear, but it grew fainter, more distant, like background noise she stopped paying attention to. And in the gaps between her thoughts, in the small silences of her mind, the forest began to seep in. She began to hear things she hadn't noticed the day before. She heard that the wind wasn't blowing steadily, but rather rising and falling, coming near and receding, like waves on an invisible sea. He heard that each bamboo stalk, according to its thickness and height, sounded different as the wind passed through it, so that the entire forest was a chorus of 1,000 different voices, some deep, some high, some long, some short, all intertwined in a music that no one conducted, and yet was perfectly harmonious. He heard the swaying reeds creak, the rustling of leaves, the buzzing of an insect, the dripping of moisture, the bird song echoing from one end of the forest to the other. And beneath all those sounds, supporting them all, he heard something he had never truly heard before. Silence. The vast silence of the forest, from which all sounds were born and to which they all returned. The silence that was always there behind every murmur, between every note, enveloping everything. And at some point that afternoon, without realizing how, Kauru stopped sitting and listening to the forest and simply began to be the forest listening to itself. The separation between him and the sounds dissolved. There was no longer a koru here and a wind there. There was only listening, pure, with no one listening and nothing heard. A listening that filled everything, in which he himself dissolved like a drop in the sea. It was a fleeting moment, and as soon as he realized it was happening, he shattered. But it was enough. In that instant, Kauru experienced for the first time something he hadn't experienced in his entire life as a famous musician. He experienced what it was like to be completely present, completely empty, completely one with the sound. And he understood, with a shudder, that this thing he had just touched for an instant, had something to do with the secret he had come to find. That afternoon he returned to the hut in a very different state than the day before. He was neither frustrated nor impatient. He came in silent, thoughtful, with a new expression on his face, the expression of someone who has glimpsed something he cannot name. "Today," he said softly, almost timidly, "I think I heard. Just for a moment. It was as if I disappeared and only the forest remained, as if no one was listening, and yet everyone was. I can't explain it, but it was the most beautiful thing I've ever felt. More beautiful than any applause, more beautiful than any melody I have ever played." Bayan smiled, and a serene satisfaction shone in his eyes. "You have taken the first step," he said. "You have listened. And in that listening, for an instant, you have disappeared. That feeling you had, that disappearance, that emptying, that union with the sound, that is the heart of it all. That is the gateway. True music is born from there, from that place where you disappear and only the sound remains. Now you're beginning to understand why I told you to listen before you played. Because playing is useless if you don't know how to disappear. And all the technique in the world is useless if it doesn't spring from that silence in which the self dissolves. Keep listening, boy. Every day. Listen to the wind and the silence from which it is born. Listen and disappear. And when you have learned to disappear by listening, then, only then, will you learn to disappear by playing. And that will be your true music. For many days, Karu continued going to the forest to listen. And each day she heard a little better. The moments when she disappeared, when she dissolved into the sounds of the forest, became a little more frequent and a little longer. He learned to quiet the chatter in his mind more easily. He learned to be present, empty, attentive, and as he learned to listen, something began to change within him. Something deeper than mere skill. His pride, little by little, began to soften. His impatience began to subside. The constant agitation that had accompanied him all his life began to quiet down, like murky water that clears up after standing still. Not completely, not by a long shot, but enough for him to notice it himself and be amazed by the change. One morning, Bayan told him that the time had come to take the next step. You have learned to listen to the forest. Now you're going to make your own flute with your own hands from a reed in this very forest. I won't give you a ready-made flute. You'll make it yourself from scratch, because there's as much to learn in making a flute as in playing it. Will I make the flute myself? Kauru asked, surprised. But I don't know how to make flutes. I've always played instruments made by the finest craftsmen. Exquisitely fine, polished, perfect flutes. I wouldn't even know where to begin to make one myself. That's precisely why you'll do it, Bayan said. Come, the first thing is to choose the cane. The old man led Koru to the forest, and they began walking among the bamboo, examining them one by one. Koru thought it would be a matter of cutting any cane that was the right thickness, but Bayan stopped before each bamboo stalk, contemplated it for a long time, ran his hands over its surface, gently tapped the cane, and listened to the sound it made. He looked at the distance between the nodes, the straightness of the stalk, the color of the skin. He rejected dozens of bamboos that Koru thought were perfectly fine, muttering that this one was too young, that one too old, this one had a twisted grain, that one had grown too quickly, and its wood was weak. Choosing the cane, he explained, is the most important thing of all. A flute can only be as good as the cane from which it grows. If you choose a bad reed, no matter how well you work it, it will never sound good. And choosing well isn't done hastily or with just your eyes. It's done with patience, with attention, listening to the bamboo, feeling its fibers, understanding its character. Each bamboo reed is different, just as each person is different, and you have to find the one whose nature is in harmony with the music that will come from it. They searched for hours without haste, and Koru, who at first had grown impatient, gradually joined in with the leisurely pace of the search. He too began to look at the bamboos differently, noticing their differences, appreciating the uniqueness of each one. Finally, as evening fell, Bayan stopped before a cane that seemed unremarkable at first glance. It was of medium thickness, moderate height, and a serene green color. He gazed at it for a long time, tapped it gently, listened, and nodded. This one, he said, this reed has a good heart. It has grown slowly, in a sheltered place, without struggling for the light, without twisting. Its fiber is firm and straight, and its sound, when I strike it, is deep and clear. A good flute can be made from this cane. Do you feel it too? Karu approached, touched the cane, struck it as he had seen the old man do, and listened. And although he lacked Bayan's sensitivity, he did indeed find something serene and steady about that cane, something that inspired confidence. "Yes," he said, "I think I feel it." "Then before cutting it," said Bayan, "we must thank it." "Thank it?" Karu repeated, puzzled. "A bamboo." "This bamboo," the old man said gravely, "has been growing here for years. It has drunk the rain, breathed the air, felt the sun and the wind and the seasons. He has lived his bamboo life, quiet and dignified in this forest. And now we are going to cut him down, to saw off his life, to turn him into a flute. That is no small thing, Karu. Taking a life, even that of a bamboo stalk, to make it into an instrument is something that must be done with respect, with gratitude, with awareness of what one is doing. We don't cut the bamboo like someone mindlessly plucking a weed. We cut it with reverence, thanking it for the life it gives us, and promising to honor its gift by making it the best flute we can, and drawing from it the truest music we are capable of playing, because the flute born from this bamboo will carry within it forever the life of this bamboo. And every time it plays, it will also be the bamboo that sings, through us, the song of its life in this forest. Karu heard those words, and something in them moved him deeply. He had never thought of his instruments in that way. For him, flutes had always been objects, tools for his own display, things he bought, used, and discarded without a second thought. It had never occurred to him to consider the life that had once existed within the wood, to thank it, or to honor its creation. And he understood that his attitude, his way of treating instruments, and perhaps all things as mere objects at the service of his ego, was yet another manifestation of his emptiness, his disconnection, his inability to move and be moved. Following the old man's instructions, Karu bowed before the bamboo, and in silence, with a sincerity that surprised even him, thanked it for the life it was about to bestow upon him. And then, with a small saw that Bayan handed him, he cut the cane slowly, carefully, reverently. He felt the fiber resist and then yield, and when at last the cane was free in his hands, he held it with a newfound delicacy, like someone holding something living and sacred. "Good," Bayan said, satisfied. "You have cut your cane and thanked it. Now begins the long and patient work of turning it into a flute. It can't be done in a day, or even two. The cane must be dried, cured, and worked little by little, carefully, without haste. And at every step of that work you will learn something. Because making a bamboo flute, my boy, is not so different from making a real person. A real person, too, is made slowly, patiently, cutting away what is superfluous, emptying out what is in the way, curing oneself of haste and pride, until at last one is hollow and clean, ready for the music of life to sing through it. And so, with the freshly cut cane in his hands, and the old man's words echoing in his heart, Karu embarked on the long and patient task of making his first real flute, unaware that it wasn't a flute he was actually beginning to build, but himself. The bamboo cane had to dry for many days, hanging under the eaves of the hut, protected from the rain. Karu, who wanted to start immediately, had to learn to wait, and that waiting was itself a lesson. As the cane dried, he continued going to the forest every day to listen, and in the evenings would sit with Bayan by the fire, and they would talk, or more often, remain silent together, listening to the wind in the bamboo. Little by little, Karu grew accustomed to this simple, quiet life, so different from the bustle of the city, and to his surprise, he began to find in it a peace he had never known. The emptiness that had tormented him so much in the city That emptiness he tried to fill with applause, there in the forest, in the silence, began to hurt less, curiously, as if in the stillness of the mountain that void found, instead of torment, a strange respite. When the cane was finally dry and cured, Bayan showed him the next step, the most important in making the flute, hollowing out the inside of the cane. Bamboo, the old man explained, is not completely hollow inside. Along the cane, at regular intervals, there are nodes, partitions that divide the interior into closed compartments. You see them on the outside, in those bulging rings that surround the reed. Inside each of those rings, there's a membrane, a wooden partition that blocks the passage. And as long as those partitions are there, the air can't travel through the reed from one end to the other, and therefore the flute can't make a sound. To make the bamboo sing, you have to pierce those nodes, break those internal partitions, open the passage, until the inside of the cane is completely hollow, completely free, a single empty channel from one end to the other. That is the most delicate and most important task. How you hollow out the inside of the cane will determine, more than anything else, how your flute sounds. And he handed her a long iron rod with a sharpened point, with which she had to patiently and carefully bore through each of the inner partitions of the cane, breaking them, cleaning them, smoothing the inner walls, until the cavity was perfectly clear and smooth. Kauru set to work and discovered that it was a difficult and meticulous task. Each partition had to be carefully pierced without damaging the walls of the cane, removing all the splinters and rough edges and smoothing the interior. A single poorly drilled partition, a single rough spot left inside, and the air wouldn't flow cleanly, and the flute would sound harsh, muffled, or out of tune. It required infinite patience, total attention, a hand that was both firm and gentle, and Koru, who was used to the swift agility of his fingers on ready-made flutes, had to learn a slowness, a meticulousness, a craftsman's humility that he had never practiced before. As he worked, day after day, patiently drilling into the inner partitions of the cane, Bayan sat beside him and talked to him. "Look at what you're doing, Kauru," he said one afternoon. "You're hollowing out the bamboo. You are breaking down the walls that divide its interior, so that there remains a single free space through which the air can flow unhindered from one end to the other. And this, my boy, is exactly what you must do with yourself. You too are full of walls inside. Walls that divide your interior, that block the passage, that prevent the breath of life from flowing freely through you. Do you know what those walls are?" "No," he said. "Which ones?" "The first wall," Bayan said, "is your pride, the idea that you are the best, that you are special, that you are above everyone else. That pride is a wall that closes off your heart, that separates you from other beings, that prevents life from flowing through you to them, and from them to you. As long as you are full of pride, you will be closed off, compartmentalized, and breath will not be able to reach you. The second wall is your fear. The fear of being ordinary, the fear of being forgotten, the fear of that emptiness you carry inside. That fear keeps you locked up, makes you cling to fame, applause, and admiration, like someone clinging to the bars of their own cage. The third wall is your craving for recognition, your need for others to see you, praise you, and confirm your worth. As long as you depend on the gaze of others to know who you are, you will be divided, incomplete, unable to let flow the true music that never springs from the desire to be admired, but from a much deeper and much freer place." Kauru listened, and each word from the old man touched a wound, named something deep inside that he'd never been able to put into words. "And there are more walls," Bayan continued. Every rigid opinion you hold about how things should be, every judgment you use to separate what you like from what you don't, every attachment to your possessions, to your name, to your image, every resentment you harbor, every envy, every desire to have more and to be more, all of those are walls, my boy, inner walls that divide you and close you off, that keep you full inside, solid, unable to sound. And just as you patiently hollow out the bamboo stalks to leave it hollow and free, so you must patiently hollow out, one by one, the walls of your own interior, until you too are hollow and free, a single open channel through which the breath of life can flow without hindrance and become, as it passes through you, true music. But how? Karu asked, with a newfound humility in her voice. How do I hollow out these inner walls? I can empty the bamboo with this iron rod, but my pride, my fear, my longing, how do I empty them? How do I rid myself of them? In the same way you empty the bamboo, Bayan replied, with patience, with attention, little by little, not all at once, not by force. Whenever you catch yourself being proud, look at it, acknowledge it, and gently let go a little. Whenever you feel the fear of being ordinary, don't run from it by filling yourself with more fame and applause, but stay with it, look it straight in the face, and you'll see that it's not as terrible as you thought, that the emptiness you fear won't destroy you if you stop running from it. Whenever you crave the recognition of others, become aware of that craving and ask yourself, who am I when no one is watching me? Who am I when there is no applause? And stay with that question, without answering it with your mind, letting it empty you. And so, little by little, wall by wall, you will empty yourself. It's not a one-day job, it's a lifetime's work. But each wall you break through, each inner division you open, will allow your breath to flow a little more freely through you. And one day, without you knowing how, you will discover that you are hollow, and that the music that comes out of you is no longer your own, the music of little Koru, who wanted to be admired, but the music of all of life singing through an empty reed. That afternoon, as he continued patiently hollowing out the partitions of his bamboo reed, Karu understood that the old man had unknowingly given him the most profound lesson he had ever received. He wasn't just learning to make a flute. He was learning to make himself. He was learning the art, the most difficult and the most beautiful of all, of emptying himself. And with each partition he broke in the cane, he felt in a mysterious way that he was also breaking a partition in his own heart, and that the air, as it began to flow through the emptying cane, also began to flow a little more freely through his own once closed soul. It took him many days to completely empty the inside of the cane, but when he finally finished, when the hollow was free and smooth from one end to the other, and he blew through it for the first time, and heard the air pass clean and clear through the empty bamboo, he felt a profound emotion, almost one of reverence. He had hollowed out the bamboo, made it hollow, and in that hollow, in that void he himself had patiently created, he could now suppress the sound. Now music could be born. He looked at the hollow reed in his hands, and then looked within himself, at that void he had feared all his life, and for the first time, instead of terror, he felt something akin to hope. Perhaps that emptiness within him, that void he believed to be a curse, was in reality like the hollow of the bamboo, the place where his true music could finally be born. One evening, after dinner, as the two sat by the dwindling fire, Bayan asked Kauru a question the musician hadn't expected. "Tell me, Kauru," the old man said wisely, "why do you need so much admiration?" The question struck Kauru like a stone dropped into a pond. stirring deep waters. He remained silent for a long time, staring at the embers, unsure how to answer. No one had ever asked him that question, not even he himself. He had always assumed that wanting to be admired was natural, that everyone wanted it, that it was simply the way of being an artist. But the old man's question opened a door to something deeper, to something that had been closed for a long time. And Karu, in the silence of the night, by the fire, with the newfound humility that was growing within him, dared for the first time to peer into that depth. "I don't know," he finally said slowly. "I suppose it's always been like this." He paused, searching his memory. "I was just an ordinary kid. I didn't come from a prominent family. We were poor. My father worked from dawn till dusk and barely looked at us. My mother was always tired, overwhelmed, busy with my younger siblings. I was just one of them, invisible, with nothing that made me special. And I remember the feeling of not mattering to anyone, of being invisible, that if I disappeared, no one would even notice. It was a horrible feeling, an emptiness, a loneliness that followed me everywhere." Bayan listened silently, with his full attention, without interrupting, and then Koru continued. "I discovered music. A traveling musician once passed through our town and played the flute in the square. And I stood there, mesmerized, listening, and something inside me awoke. I got an old flute and started to play, and I discovered I had talent, a rare talent, and that when I played, people looked at me. For the first time in my life, people looked at me, saw me, pointed at me, smiled at me, praised me. 'Look at that boy, he plays so well, Auntie,' and that look from others, that being finally seen after so many years of being invisible, was like water to a thirsty soul. It was as if I finally existed, as if I finally mattered. And ever since then, I haven't stopped searching for that look. I've played, each time better, each time with greater mastery, always chasing that look of admiration, that feeling of being seen, that feeling of mattering, because every time I stop playing, every time the applause ends, the emptiness returns, the feeling of being that invisible child that no one cared about returns. And I can't stand it. I can't stand that emptiness. So I play more, I seek more applause, more fame, trying to fill it, but it's never filled. No matter how much applause I receive, no matter how famous I become, the emptiness always returns. Always. Kaoru finished speaking and fell silent, surprised that he had finally said aloud everything he had kept hidden deep inside his entire life. He felt a mixture of shame and relief, the shame of having revealed his wound and the relief of having finally revealed it. Bayan paused for a moment of respectful silence, then spoke in a voice filled with deep, serene compassion. "Thank you for telling me this, Kaoru," she said. "Now I understand your music, and now you understand too, perhaps for the first time, why your music amazes but doesn't move people. Listen carefully, because this is important. You play to fill a void. You play to be seen, to be admired, to stop feeling like that invisible child. All your music, however perfect it may be, is born from that need, that lack, that soul's constant plea. Look at me, admire me, tell me I matter. Why should he?" And that's why it doesn't move people. Because music that begs, music that pleads for admiration, can give nothing to the listener. It only asks. And people, even if they don't consciously understand it, feel it in their hearts. She feels that this music doesn't come to give them anything, but to ask for something, to ask for their admiration, their gaze, their applause, and that's why they admire your skill. But they aren't moved, because no one is moved by someone who asks, only by someone who gives. Kaoru felt those words pierce her, painful and true at the same time. The music that moves you, the old man continued, is the opposite of yours. It doesn't spring from an emptiness that cries out to be filled, but from a fullness that overflows and gives itself away. It doesn't ask, it gives. He doesn't beg for the gaze of others. He looks at them, sees them, embraces them with his sound, gives them something beautiful without expecting anything in return. When I play my flute in a plaza, Kaoru, I don't play to be admired. I don't care if they admire me. I don't care if they give me a handful of rice or nothing at all. I don't play to fill any void within myself, because I made peace with my emptiness long ago, and I discovered that it wasn't a lack to be filled, but a spring from which to give. I play simply to give, to offer whoever passes by, whoever wants to listen, a moment of beauty, a moment of peace, a moment in which their own soul, touched by the sound, remembers something beautiful they had forgotten. I play like someone who gives water to the thirsty, keeping nothing for myself, asking for nothing in return. And that's why, sometimes, people cry. Not because I'm special, but because in that giving without asking, in that selfless surrender, something true passes through me and touches the truth within them. But I don't know how to give like that, Kaoru said, her voice breaking. I've spent my whole life begging for music. I don't know how to play any other way. I don't know how to stop needing the gaze of others. That invisible child is still inside me, asking to be seen. Bayan leaned toward him and placed a hand on his shoulder with infinite tenderness. That invisible child, he said softly, doesn't need to be seen by others, Kaoru. He needs you to see him. All your life you've sought in the eyes of others what only you could give yourself. You've asked 1,000 strangers to tell you that you matter, when the only look that child needed was yours. Turn inward. Look at that child you once were, that lonely, invisible child who thought no one cared, and tell him what he so desperately needed to hear. I see you. You matter, not because you play well, not because you're admired, not because you're special. You matter simply because you are alive, because you exist, just as every blade of grass and every star in the sky matters. When you learn to give yourself that gaze, when the invisible child within you finally feels seen, then you will stop begging for the gaze of others, and only then, finally free from that begging, will you be able to touch not to ask, but to give. And your music will finally move people. That night, lying on his mat in the hut, Kaoru couldn't sleep for a long time. The old man's words kept swirling in his heart. The invisible child, the gaze he had sought all his life in others and could only give to himself. The music he asks for and the music he gives. And in the darkness, in the silence of the bamboo forest, Kaoru did something he had never done before. He turned inward, toward that lonely child he had been, that child who felt transparent, invisible, unimportant, and instead of running away from him, as he had done all his life seeking fame, he stayed with him. He looked at him, and with a clumsy, new, trembling tenderness, she said to him silently, I see you. You matter. I am here. And as I did so, something very deep in his chest, something he had carried shrunken and aching since childhood, began, very slowly, to flow, to rest, to heal. And Kaoru, the great Kaoru, the most famous flautist of the lowlands, wept silently in the darkness, not from sadness, but from a deep and sweet relief, the relief of beginning, at last, to make peace with the emptiness he carried within. Once the inside of the reed was completely hollowed out and smoothed, the flute still needed finishing, the mouthpiece for blowing, and the finger holes for changing notes. Bayan guided Kauru through each step with his usual patience. He showed him how to carefully carve the mouthpiece, giving it the precise angle so that the air striking the edge would produce the sound. He taught her how to precisely measure the position of the holes, how to drill them little by little, how to test the sound of each one, and how to adjust them until the flute was in tune. It was a long and meticulous task that demanded all the attention and humility that Kauru had been learning. And unlike her exquisitely crafted flutes from the city, polished and perfect, this flute she made with her own hands was rough, simple, and imperfect. But it was his. It had been born from a reed in that forest, which he himself had thanked before cutting it. He had hollowed it out with his own hands, section by section, and in a way he couldn't have explained. He felt for that humble flute a fondness, a respect, a connection he had never felt for any of the expensive instruments he had owned. Finally, one day, the flute was finished. Kauru held it in her hands, gazing at it. It was a hollow bamboo reed with a mouthpiece and some holes, nothing more. So simple, so humble, and yet, in its empty space, music awaited. "The time has come," Kauru said, her voice trembling with emotion. "To learn to play it, to learn your secret, to learn to make that music that moves us." Bayan smiled. "Yes and no," he said. "The time has come to begin, but not to play melodies or flourishes or anything you understand as playing. The first thing you will learn is not to play, but to blow, to breathe through the flute. And that, which seems the simplest thing of all, is actually the most difficult and the most important." He led Kauru to a quiet spot in the forest and motioned for her to sit down. "Take your flute," he said. "Bring it to your lips and blow, but don't try to play any particular note. Don't try to do anything fancy. Just blow gently and let the air pass through the hollow reed and listen to the sound that comes out. A single sound, sustained as long as your breath lasts. Nothing more. Blow and listen." Kauru brought the flute to his lips, took a deep breath, and blew. A sound came out, but it was an ugly, forced, trembling sound. Kauru, out of habit, had blown hard, energetically, trying to produce a powerful and bright sound, as he did in his performances. And the result was a harsh, unbeautiful squeak. "Too much force," Bayan said. "You blow like someone pushing, like someone forcing, like someone who wants to dominate the sound and make it their own. But sound cannot be controlled. Sound cannot be forced. Sound is allowed to pass. Listen, it is not you who makes the sound. It is the air passing through the hollow reed. You are merely the one who lets the air pass through. You are not the master of sound. You are its servant, its conduit, its gateway. Release the force, release the desire to make a beautiful sound. Just let the air flow, smooth and free, through the reed, and let the sound emerge on its own, without you forcing it." Kauru tried again, this time blowing more gently, trying not to strain. The sound improved a little, but it was still strained, controlled, and forced. Bayan shook his head. "You're still trying to do it yourself," he said. "There's still a Kauru in there, determined to produce a good sound, controlling, directing, striving. And as long as there is a Kauru making the sound will be Kauru's sound, small, tense, limited by the small self making it. You have to disappear, boy. Do you remember when you listened to the forest, and for an instant you disappeared and only the listening remained? Well, now you have to do the same when you blow. You must disappear and let only the blowing remain. Let there be no Kauru blowing, but only the breath passing through the reed, only the sound being born, with no one to make it. Let the wind of the whole world blow through you, as it blows through the bamboos of the forest. Bamboo doesn't strive to make a sound. There isn't a single bamboo stalk intent on producing a beautiful sound. The wind blows, and they, hollow as they are, simply let it pass through. And from that passing, their music is born. Be like the bamboo, Kauru, empty, hollow, with no one inside striving, just a reed through which the wind passes and sings. Kauru closed his eyes. He tried to remember the feeling of disappearing he had experienced listening to the forest. He tried to let go of the Koru who wanted to make a good sound, the Koru who struggled, who controlled, who wanted to show off. He tried to become hollow, empty, like bamboo, and he breathed and let the air flow softly, without pushing it, without directing it, just letting it pass through the hollow reed. And for an instant, just one instant, it happened. The Kauru who had been straining disappeared. There was no one blowing anymore. There was only breath passing through the bamboo and a sound being born. A pure, clean, serene sound, which was not the sound of Kauru, but the sound of the air and the reed and the silence. The sound of something much bigger than him passing through him. It was a simple sound, a single sustained note, without any embellishment, without any boasting. But it had something that none of Kauru's brilliant melodies had ever had. It had truth. It had soul. It had the deep serenity of the forest and the wind, and the emptiness from which it was born. The sound lasted only as long as that instant of disappearance. As soon as Kauru realized what was happening, as soon as he thought, "I've done it, this is it, this is the sound," the small self returned, the effort returned, the control returned, and the sound tensed again, became small, lost its truth. But Kauru opened his eyes, astonished, his heart pounding. It had happened. Just for an instant, but it had happened. He had played a real sound for the first time in his life, and he knew, without a doubt, that that sound, that single, simple sound born of his disappearance, was more beautiful, more true, more moving than all the brilliant melodies he had played in his entire life as a famous musician. "You felt it," said Bayan, watching him with a serene smile. "That is the true sound, the sound that is born when you disappear. You didn't do it. You couldn't do it, no matter how hard you tried, because it's precisely your effort, your desire to do it, that prevents it. It was born on its own, when you stepped back, when you emptied yourself, when you let it pass through you. That's the secret you came looking for, Koru, though it's not a secret you can possess or master. You don't make true music. True music flows through you when you're empty enough to let it through. You are not the musician. You are the flute. And the flute, to truly sound, simply needs to be hollow and let the breath of life sing through it." Kauru gazed at his humble flute, that bamboo reed he himself had hollowed out, and understood, with an emotion that filled his eyes with tears, that he too had to become like that, a hollow reed emptied of himself, through which the music of life could pass freely and become beauty. He didn't have to learn to make music. He had to learn to disappear so that the music could be made through him. And that, he understood, would be Mona Storm's work, the hardest work of all, the work of emptying himself again and again, of revealing himself, which he wanted to do, which he wanted one day perhaps to become as hollow as bamboo, and let the wind of the world sing through him unhindered, effortlessly, without Koru. From that day on, a new stage began for Koru, the longest and most difficult of all. Bayan didn't teach him melodies, didn't teach him songs, didn't teach him flourishes or embellishments. He taught him to play a single note, one, the lowest and simplest note of the flute, the one they called the earth note in the forest, a deep, long, dark, and serene sound, and she told him to practice it, just that one, for as long as it took. Just one note, Karu asked, puzzled. But I know how to play entire melodies, the most difficult ones there are. Chaiji weiter. Why should I spend my time playing a single note, the simplest of all? Precisely because you know how to play difficult melodies, and you don't know how to play a single true note, Bayan replied. A difficult melody can hide the emptiness of the one who plays it behind 1,000 flourishes, but a single note, long and bare, is not condemned. In a single sustained note, you hear everything that is in the one who plays it, their calm or their agitation, their truth or their falsehood, their fullness or their lack. A single note is the most ruthless and honest mirror there is. If you truly learn to play a single note, with your whole soul, with your entire being, empty of yourself, then you will be able to play anything. But if you cannot play a single note, all your melodies, however brilliant, will be truly hollow, even if filled with notes. Practice the note, Karu, all of it, every morning, every evening, and listen to what the note tells you about yourself. And so, Karu began to practice the note. Every morning, at dawn, she would sit in a clearing in the forest, put the flute to her lips, breathe in, and play the long, low note, holding it as long as her breath lasted, and then breathe in again and play it again, over and over, for hours. And every afternoon she did the same thing. The note, always the same note, over and over again, until the sound of that deep, resonant note permeated all her days and all her nights. At first, as was to be expected, Kaoru tried to make the note sound beautiful. She poured all her technique, all her care, all her effort into producing a perfect, full, impressive sound. She controlled her breath with precision, adjusted her lips, measured the force of her breath, trying to draw out the most beautiful note possible. And the note indeed sounded good, sounded correct, sounded technically flawless. But something was missing. It lacked precisely what that moment of disappearance, when it had played its first true sound, had possessed in abundance. It lacked soul, it lacked truth. And Koru noticed it, and he grew frustrated, and he tried even harder to make the note beautiful. And the harder he tried, the more that truth eluded him, the more technical and lifeless the note sounded. One day, after an entire morning striving to perfect the note without managing to give it any soul, Kaoru went to see Bayan, frustrated. "I don't understand it," he said. "I play the note as best I can. I put all my technique, all my care into it. It sounds right, it sounds good, but it doesn't have what that first sound had, the one that was born when I disappeared. The harder I try to make it beautiful, the less beautiful it turns out. What am I doing wrong?" "That's precisely what you're doing wrong," Bayan said. "Striving to make it beautiful. Don't you see? When you played your first true sound, you didn't strive to make it beautiful. On the contrary, you let go of the effort. You let go of wanting to make a good sound. You disappeared, and the beautiful sound was born on its own, without you seeking it. True beauty is never born from seeking it. It is born from letting go. It is born when you stop trying to create beauty and are simply present, empty, surrendered to the moment. You, on the other hand, have reverted to your old ways. You want to create a beautiful note. You pursue it. You force it. You strive for it. And that very desire, that very effort is what kills it. It's like trying to catch the moon's reflection in the water. The more you reach out to grasp it, the more it shatters. Stop chasing the beauty of the note, Koru. Stop trying so hard to make it beautiful. Just play the note, simply, without wanting anything. present and empty, and let it be whatever it is. If it turns out ugly, let it turn out ugly. If it turns out beautiful, so be it. It's not your business. Your only business is to be present, empty, and let the breath flow. Beauty will come on its own, or it won't, and either way, that's okay. Kaoru returned to her practice and tried to apply what the old man had told her. She tried to stop chasing beauty. He tried to play the note without expecting it to be beautiful. But he discovered it was more difficult than it seemed. His habit of striving, of pursuing, of wanting to show off, was so ingrained in him after a lifetime that it crept into his practice time and time again, without him even realizing it. She played the note trying not to strain, but that very attempt to strain was itself an effort. She played the note trying not to chase beauty, but that very attempt not to chase it was itself a way of chasing it. She was trapped in a subtle web woven from her own desires, and the more she struggled to escape, the more entangled she became. That drove him to despair for days, but it was precisely that despair, that reaching the limit of his strength, that repeatedly crashing against the wall of his own effort until he was exhausted, that finally opened a crack, because one afternoon, after hours of frustrated practice, Kaoru gave up. He simply gave up. He stopped trying to play the note well. He stopped trying not to try. He stopped trying anything. He felt so tired, so defeated, so devoid of all hope of succeeding, that he gave up completely, and he brought the flute to his lips without any intention, without any desire, without any will, simply to play it, just because she no longer had the strength even to wish. And she breathed, and she blew, that's all. And the note that came out was genuine. It was deep, serene, full, filled with a quiet, effortless beauty. The beauty of the earth note played by a hollow reed through which the wind passes freely. Kaoru hadn't written it. Kaoru had given up, withdrawn, disappeared into her own exhaustion. And in that withdrawal, in that surrender, the true note had been born on its own. Kaoru heard it, that deep, true note emanating from her own flute, and felt a shiver run through her entire body. She understood at last, with a comprehension that was no longer just in her mind, but in her whole being, what the old man had been trying to teach her for so long. Truth is not conquered. One surrenders to it. Beauty is not created. It is allowed to be born. And true sound does not come from effort, but precisely from the place where effort, exhausted, is finally released, and the small, struggling self finally falls silent and disappears. That realization, that true sound, was born from surrender, not effort, marked a turning point in Kaoru's practice. But understanding something once, in a fortunate moment, is not the same as having it settled in your heart forever. And in the days that followed, Kaoru discovered that this truth eluded him time and again, that he would fall back into his old habits after striving and pursuing it, and that the path to truly solidifying what he understood was long and required repeating the same lesson 1,000 times until it ceased to be an idea and became his natural way of being. One afternoon, while resting from his practice with Bayan, Kaoru asked him a question that troubled him. "Master," he said, "all my life I have studied flute technique. I've learned the fingerings, the scales, the ways of blowing, the flourishes, the whole art of playing. And now you teach me that true music isn't in technique, but in emptiness, in disappearance, in letting the breath pass. So, what's the point of all the technique I learned? Was it all in vain? Should I forget it, discard it, play as if I'd never learned anything?" Bayan smiled, and instead of answering directly, he pointed at the moon that was beginning to appear pale in the evening sky. "Look at my finger," he said. I'm pointing at the moon. My finger is pointing towards it, so you know where to look. Now tell me, is my finger the moon? No, of course not, said Karu. Your finger is only pointing at the moon. The moon is up there, far away. The finger only indicates where to look. Exactly, Bayan said. The finger points to the moon, but it is not the moon. What if, instead of looking at the moon, where the finger points, you kept looking at the finger, studying it, admiring it, believing that the finger is what's important? Would you never see the moon? The finger is useful. It's necessary. He points the way. But the finger is not the destination. The finger is at the service of the moon, not the other way around. He lowered his hand and looked at Koru. Technique, boy, is like a finger. It's useful. It's necessary. It points the way to music. But technique is not music. Music is like the moon. It's beyond the finger, beyond technique. And the mistake almost all musicians make, the mistake you've made your whole life, is to keep looking at the finger, to fall in love with technique, to believe that technique is what's important, to perfect it endlessly, while completely forgetting the moon toward which technique should be aimed. They become great admirers of fingers, experts in fingers, masters of the finger, and they never see the moon. They never make true music because they have confused the means with the end, the finger with the moon, the technique with the music. Kauru listened and felt that those words illuminated something that had long confused him. Then, he said, shouldn't I discard the technique? No, Bayan replied. Don't discard it. Technique is like a good finger, and a good finger points at the moon better than a clumsy one. Your technique, so honed, so perfect, is an excellent finger. Preserve it, but stop looking at it. Stop believing it's what's important. Stop playing to show off your finger so people admire how well you point. Use technique, yes, but use it to point at the moon, to serve the music, and then forget about it, and look at the moon, and let the music, the moon, be the only thing that matters. When you truly play, technique should be so assimilated, so forgotten, that you no longer think about it. Just as when you walk, you don't think about how you move your legs. The true master is not the one who displays their technique, but the one who has forgotten it so well that they possess it, and through it, without thinking about it, lets the moon of music shine. The highest technique is the one that becomes invisible, the one that disappears in service to something greater than itself. That teaching comforted Kauru because it showed her that her life of study had not been in vain, that her technique was not her enemy, but an instrument that she would now learn to put at the service of something deeper. And at the same time, he humiliated him because he clearly showed him the mistake of his entire life. Having fallen in love with the finger, having remained focused on his own skill, without ever seeing the moon toward which he should have been aiming. There's something else I want to teach you today, Bayan said after a silence. And it has to do with this. Tell me, Kauru, when you were a child and first held a flute in your hands, without knowing how to play, without knowing anything about technique, what was your relationship with music like? Kauru closed his eyes, remembering. It was pure, he said slowly. When I was a child and I started playing, I knew nothing. I had no technique. I had no ideas about how it should sound. There was only wonder and curiosity, and an enormous joy in discovering each new sound. Every note was a miracle. Every simple melody I managed to play filled me with immense happiness. I didn't play to impress anyone because I didn't know how to play well. I played out of pure love for sounds, out of pure wonder at the magic of music. It was beautiful. Now that I think about it, it was the most beautiful thing about my relationship with music. and I lost it. At some point, as I became more skilled, I lost it. That, Bayan said, is what we call the beginner's mind, the mind of someone starting out, someone who doesn't know, someone who looks at everything with wonder and freshness, as if seeing it for the first time. In the beginner's mind, there are infinite possibilities, infinite openness, and infinite capacity for wonder. In the expert's mind, however, there are very few, because the expert believes they already know. They already know the music. They already master the technique. They already have heard everything. They are no longer surprised by anything. Their mind is full of what they know, and that fullness, like an overflowing bowl, leaves no room for freshness, for wonder, for discovery. The expert has gained technique, but has lost wonder. And wonder, Karu, is the heart of all true music. Without awe, without freshness, without that clear-eyed novice who sees every sound as a miracle, music becomes mechanical, dead, however perfect its technique may be. But I can't go back to being a beginner, Karu said. I can't unlearn what I know. I can't return to the ignorance of my childhood. It's not about unlearning what you know, Bayan said, but about regaining the beginner's perspective while retaining the wisdom of the expert. It's about playing each note as if it were the first time you've ever played it, as if it were the first note in the world, with all the wonder and freshness of a child, and at the same time with all the depth of someone who has traveled a long road. The true master is not the expert who has lost everything under the weight of their knowledge. It is the one who, after a long journey of learning, returns to the freshness of the beginner, but now enriched by the depth of the journey. It is the one who has come full circle, from the child's ignorance to the expert's knowledge, and from the expert's knowledge back to a higher ignorance, a wise ignorance, in which every note becomes a miracle again, every sound amazes once more, every moment of music becomes a first time. Empty your experience too, Karu. Empty yourself, I know. Empty yourself even of your mastery, not to lose it, but so as not to become imprisoned by it, and play each note as if you had never played one before, with the pure eyes and heart of a child discovering the magic of sound for the first time. That afternoon, Karu returned to his practice of the note with a new disposition. He tried to play the note as if it were the first time, as if he had never played a flute before, with wonder, with freshness, with the clear-eyed gaze of a beginner. And he discovered that, in doing so, the note took on a new life. It was no longer a note he knew intimately, one he had played 1,000 times, but a miracle happening in that instant, a sound born for the first time in the world, unique, unrepeatable, astonishing. And in that renewed wonder, in that regained freshness, the music began to flow with a life and a truth that all his expert technique had never given him, for he had recovered, enriched along the way, the clear-eyed gaze of the child he had been, that child who would pick up a flute and marvel, unaware that in that pure wonder lay, whole and complete, the secret of all true music that he would spend the rest of his life searching for, only to discover at last that he had always possessed it, and that he simply had to return to it, emptying himself of everything that had made him forget it. Weeks passed, and then months. Kauru remained in the mountains practicing his note, listening to the forest, slowly emptying himself. And although he didn't notice it from one day to the next, anyone who had known him in the city and saw him now would have been astonished by the change. His haughty bearing had softened. His face, once tense with anxiety and pride, had become serene. His movements had become more measured, more present. The great Koru, the most famous flautist in the lowlands, was beginning to subtly resemble a man at peace. But his pride and thirst for recognition, though weakened, had not entirely died. They were still there, asleep at the bottom, waiting for the chance to awaken. And that chance came one afternoon, when a traveller stopped in the clearing by the hut to ask for water. The traveller came from the city, from the lowlands where Koru was from, and upon seeing Koru, though he didn't recognize him at first, with his worn clothes and serene air, he finally identified him, surprised. "But aren't you Koru the flautist?" he asked. "Yes, you are Koru the great flautist. What are you doing here, on this lost mountain, dressed like a pauper?" Kauru felt, much against his will, a small shudder of pleasure at being recognized, at hearing his name spoken with such admiration. The old pride, asleep, shook his head. "I live here now," replied. "I study with a master. And what do they say about me in the city? Do they still remember me? Do they talk about my music?" And as soon as he asked those questions, he was ashamed of having asked them, because he recognized in them the old longing, the old begging, the old invisible child asking to be told what mattered. But he had already asked them, and he waited for the answer with a restless heart. The traveller shifted uncomfortably. "Well," he said hesitantly, "the truth is, sir, you disappeared from the city a long time ago, without saying a word to anyone. And people, you know how people are. At first, they wondered where you were. But then, a new flautist appeared, a very gifted young man, and the whole city rallied around him. Now everyone talks about him, everyone admires him, everyone says he's the best flautist who ever lived. And well, hardly anyone remembers you anymore. Forgive me for being so blunt, but the world is forgetful, and there's always someone new. They say your time has passed, that you were great, but that you're now a thing of the past." The words hit Kauru like a bucket of ice water. He felt the ground open up beneath his feet, forgotten. No one remembered him anymore. Another had taken his place, and the entire city, which had admired him so much, had simply forgotten him, like an outdated melody. All that love, all that admiration for which he had lived, for which he had played his entire life, had vanished, been transferred to another, left behind. And the old terror, the terror of the invisible child, the terror of not mattering to anyone, of being transparent, of disappearing, seized him like a brutal force, and he felt his heart shrink, his breath catch in his throat. All the peace he had built on the mountain crumble away in an instant. The traveller, after drinking his water, continued on his way, and Kauru was left alone in the clearing, devastated, with his old wound gaping open. He remained like that for a long time, consumed by despair, until Bayan, who had watched everything from the doorway of the hut, approached and sat down beside him. "The traveller has brought you bad news," the old man said gently. "They've forgotten me," Kauru murmured, her voice breaking. "No one in the city remembers me anymore. Someone else has taken my place. Everything I was, all my fame, all the admiration I received has disappeared, as if I had never existed. I am once again that invisible child whom no one cares about." Bayan was silent for a moment and then, instead of comforting him with sweet words, told him a story. "A long time ago," he said, "there lived in a village a wise man, a teacher respected by all. People came to him for advice, praised him, honored him, and called him a saint. One day, a young woman from the village became pregnant, and when her furious father demanded she reveal the father's identity, she, out of fear or spite, pointed to the teacher. The news spread like wildfire, and the entire village, which had revered him the day before, turned against him overnight. They insulted him, spat on him, called him a hypocrite and shameless. When the child was born, The young woman's father went to the teacher's house, threw the baby into his arms and shouted, "He's yours, take care of him." And the teacher, faced with all those accusations, with all that hatred from the people who had once adored him, simply said 2 words, "Oh really?" And he took the child and cared for him, without defending himself, without complaining, without protesting, and he raised him with love while the whole town despised him. Time passed, and the young woman, tormented by remorse, finally confessed the truth. The teacher was innocent. The real father was someone else, a young man from the village whom she had tried to protect. When the village found out, they were filled with shame. Everyone went to the teacher's house, prostrated themselves before him, tearfully begged his forgiveness, showered him with honors and praise once more, and pleaded with him to return the child to his true mother. And the teacher, faced with all those apologies, all those honors, the restoration of his good name, simply said, once again, 2 words as he handed the child over. "Oh really?" Bayan paused and looked at Kauru with his serene eyes. When they accused him and hated him, he said, "Oh really?" When they honored him and praised him, he said, "Oh really?" Neither slander brought him down, nor praise exalted him. He remained the same, serene, at peace, both in scorn and in glory. Do you know why, Kauru? Because his peace didn't depend on what others thought of him. He hadn't placed his worth, his identity, or his happiness in the hands of people's opinions. He knew who he was inside, regardless of what people said on the outside. And that's why, when people's opinions shifted, from hatred to veneration, and from veneration to hatred, he didn't change with them. He remained steadfast, like a mountain that doesn't waver when sometimes shrouded in clouds and sometimes illuminated by the sun. But I'm not like that, Kauru said. I depend entirely on what people think of me. When they admire me, I feel soaring. When I'm forgotten, I sink. My peace, my worth, everything is in the hands of others. And that's why this news has devastated me. I know, Bayan said gently. But look at this, Kauru. This painful news, this news that has devastated you, is actually one of the greatest gifts you could receive, because it has shown you with perfect clarity where your treasure lay. You had placed it outside yourself, in the opinions of others, in fame, in the admiration of others. And everything placed outside in the hands of others is fragile, changeable, and sooner or later is lost because people forget. And someone new always arrives. And the glory of this world is like passing clouds. As long as your treasure is out there, you will always live at the mercy of the wind, soaring one day and sinking the next, with no peace possible. But there is another place to put your treasure. A place no one can take from you. A place that doesn't depend on anyone's opinion. That isn't lost when people forget. That place is inside you. It's that true note you've learned to play when you disappear. It's that peace you've tasted listening to the forest. It is that wellspring of tranquility you carry within you, which you are beginning to discover. When you place your treasure there inside, in what no one can take from you, then you too will be able to speak before praise and oblivion, before glory and scorn, with the same serenity as the Master. Is that so? And you will be free, Kauru, finally free from the prison of others' opinions in which you have been held captive all your life. Those words, though they didn't instantly erase Kauru's pain, began to work on him like a slow medicine. During the following days, as he practiced his music in the forest, he meditated on them again and again, and little by little, something began to change within him. He began to realize that the news, the city's neglect, though it hurt, hadn't killed him. He was still alive, still breathing, still playing his tune. The forest still whispered, The wind still blew through the bamboo. The sun still rose every morning. And all of that, the forest, the wind, the sun, his note, his breath, his very life, didn't depend at all on whether the city people remembered him or forgot him. He was there, whole, complete, independent of all opinions. And in that realization, very slowly, a freedom he had never known began to be born in Koru, the freedom to exist, to touch, to live, not to be admired, but simply for the serene joy of existing, of touching, of living. And he understood that the city's oblivion, which had wounded him so deeply, was ultimately the severing of a final rope, the rope that still bound him to his old beggary, and that its cutting, though painful, left him, for the first time, truly free. One night that autumn, something happened that left an indelible mark on Koru. He had already gone to bed on his mat in the humble hut when a faint noise woke him. He opened his eyes in the darkness and strained his ears, hearing furtive footsteps and the rustling of someone rummaging in the hut. His heart racing, he sat up slowly, and in the dim moonlight filtering through the half-open door, he made out the silhouette of a man, a stranger, searching the inside of the hut, undoubtedly looking for something of value to steal. Kaoru was on the verge of shouting, of getting up, of confronting the intruder. But then he saw that Bayan had also woken up and was sitting on his mat, very calm, watching the thief without any alarm, with the same serenity with which he watched the wind through the bamboo. And that calmness of the old man restrained Kaoru, who remained still, expectant, to see what his master would do. The thief, searching the hut, found nothing, and it was no wonder, because there was nothing to steal in that hut. There was no money, no valuables, nothing but a few mats, some clay bowls, the iron kettle, some rice, and the old man's humble bamboo flute. The thief, increasingly frustrated, rummaged through the few belongings, searching in vain for a treasure that didn't exist. And then Bayan spoke, in a calm and kind voice, without the slightest reproach. "Friend, I imagine you've come from very far away, and by night, and along difficult paths, to this hut lost in the mountains. It would be a shame if you left empty-handed. But you see, I'm a poor man, and I don't have anything of value here for you to take. I'm truly sorry." Wait. To Kaoru's astonishment and the thief's own shock, the old man stood up, removed the habit he was wearing, the only one he owned besides his daytime robes, and offered it to the intruder. "Here," he said, "at least take this. It's an old patched-up habit, but it keeps you warm, and the nights are starting to get cold. I don't want you to have come all this way for nothing. Take my clothes, please, like a gift." The thief, who had come to steal and suddenly found his victim willingly offering him what little he had, was completely bewildered. He looked at the old man, at the habit he was holding out, without understanding. For a moment he seemed about to say something, but he couldn't find the words. And finally, confused and ashamed, he took the habit from Bayan's hands, and without a word, almost fleeing, left the hut and disappeared into the darkness of the forest. Bayan stood in the doorway, staring into the night where the thief had gone. He shivered slightly in the cold, wearing only his shirt, without his habit, and then, gazing at the sky, he said softly, almost to himself, with a note of gentle melancholy and serene humor, "Poor man, I only wish I could have given him something better. I only wish I could have given him this beautiful moon." And he gestured toward the full moon, which shone splendidly over the bamboo forest, bathing everything in its silvery light. Kaoru, who had witnessed the entire scene in disbelief, approached the old man. "Master," he said, somewhere between astonishment and indignation. Why did you do that? That man came to rob you. He was a thief, and instead of throwing him out, scolding him, defending yourselves, you gave him your own clothes, the only ones you had. Why? Doesn't it make you angry? Aren't you afraid he'll come back or tell other thieves? Bayan went back into the hut, sat down again on his mat, and gazed calmly at Karu. Rage, he said. Against whom? Against a poor, desperate man driven to steal at night from a remote shack. A man like that doesn't deserve my anger, but my compassion. Think of the life he must lead, the hunger, the need, the fear that compels him to take such risks. How can I be angry with him? I'm more sorry I didn't have anything better to offer him. As for the fear that he'll come back or bring others, what could they possibly take that I'd care about? I have nothing to fear losing because I'm not attached to anything. The few things in this hut aren't really mine. I only use them while I'm alive, and then they'll pass into other hands, as everything does. If someone takes them first, so what? A man who doesn't cling to anything has nothing to fear because there's nothing they can take from him that he wasn't already prepared to let go of. But you gave him your own clothes, Karu insisted. Now you'll be cold. A little cold one night, Bayan said, shrugging with a smile, is nothing compared to the freedom of not clinging. Look, Karu, all of men's lives are a struggle to accumulate and to protect what they accumulate. They accumulate wealth, possessions, honors, and fame, and then live in terror of losing them, defending them tooth and nail, suffering every time something slips through their fingers. They become slaves to what they own. The more they have, the more they fear losing it, and the less free they are. I chose the opposite path a long time ago. I chose not to accumulate, not to cling, to possess only what is essential, and to always be ready to let go of everything. And do you know what I discovered? That in that non-attachment lies the greatest freedom and the greatest wealth. The man who fears nothing to lose possesses everything, because he possesses the only thing that truly matters, the peace of a free heart. That thief has taken my habit, but he could not take, nor will he ever be able to take, what I truly have. The moon over the bamboo, the whisper of the wind, the peace of this night, the freedom of my heart. These riches are not in any chest that can be stolen. They are everywhere and nowhere, and they belong to those who know how to see them, and they are never exhausted, no matter how much they are given. That's why I regretted not being able to give him the moon, because the moon is true wealth, and I would have liked him to have it too, although deep down, the moon is already his, as it is everyone's if they learn to see it. Karu remained silent, contemplating the old man in his shirt, sitting serenely in his empty hut, after having given his clothes to a thief, speaking of the moon as the greatest of riches, and he felt that he was before something that completely surpassed everything he had ever known. All his life he had accumulated, possessed, protected, and feared losing. All his life he had unknowingly been a slave to what he had and what he wanted. And now, before that free old man who owned nothing and feared nothing, he understood for the first time what true freedom, true wealth, true peace truly were. It wasn't about having much. It was about needing nothing. It wasn't about accumulating. It was about letting go. And that thief, who had come to steal and left wearing an old habit, had unknowingly crossed paths with the richest man in the world, a man so rich he could give away what little he had and remain as serene, as fulfilled, as free as the moon that shone, impossible to steal, over the bamboo forest. That night, lying again on his mat, Kauru didn't think, as he might have before, about his lost fame or the admiration of the city. He thought about the moon. He thought about the old man's freedom. He thought about all the things he had closed himself off to throughout his life, things that had kept him imprisoned, and she felt a deep desire to let them go, to empty herself of them as well, to become as free and hollow as the bamboo, as serene and impossible to steal as the moon. And in that new desire, in that yearning for freedom, she felt her heart taking another step on the long road to emptying itself. Winter came to the bamboo forest. The first snows fell, and the green reeds bent under the white weight. The ever-whispering forest grew even quieter, enveloped in the cottony stillness of the snow. Kauru had been on the mountain for almost a year, and that winter something began to blossom within him, amidst the cold and silence, something that had been slowly germinating throughout all the months of practice and teaching. One winter afternoon, Kauru went out alone into the snowy forest with his flute. He wasn't going to practice the note as a chore, nor to strive to improve, nor to pursue any goal. He was going simply because he felt like playing. For the first time in his life, he felt the desire to play not for anyone, not to be admired, not to achieve anything, but only for the joy of playing, for the serene pleasure of letting his breath pass through the hollow reed and become sound. There, alone in the middle of the snowy forest, with no witnesses but the bent bamboo and the grey winter sky, he sat on a snow-covered rock, breathed in the cold, clean air, put the flute to his lips, and began to play, not a learned melody, but whatever came to him in that moment. Single, simple, spaced notes, with long silences between them, letting himself be carried away by what the moment demanded. And as he played, without intending to, without seeking it, he began to disappear. The karo he played faded away, leaving only the playing, only the breath passing through the reed, only the sound born in the cold air and spreading through the snowy forest. And in that disappearance, the music that came from his flute had something it had never before possessed in such a complete way. It had the serenity of the snowy forest, the stillness of winter, the white silence of the snow, and the bareness of bent reeds. It had at last truth. It had soul. It was music that asked for nothing, that didn't show off, that didn't seek admiration, but simply surrendered, spilling into the air like snow falling from the sky, effortlessly, unintentionally, by pure and overflowing nature. Kauro played for an unknown amount of time, lost, dissolved, hollow, letting the music pass through him, and for a long time, longer than any of the fleeting moments he had known before, he remained in that state of disappearance, in that union with the sound, in that true music that flowed on its own. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever experienced. It was finally playing the music he had longed for all his life, the music that touched the soul, not the souls of others at that moment, for he was alone, but his own, which trembled with beauty and peace. But then something happened. In the midst of that true music, in the midst of that disappearance, a part of Kauro, the old part, the old self, suddenly awoke and thought, "This is it. I've done it. I'm finally playing real music. How beautiful this is. I have to hold on to this. I have to grasp it. I have to make sure I can always do it." And the very instant he thought that, the instant he tried to grasp that music, to hold on to it, to possess it, the music broke. The disappearance was broken. The Kauro that wanted to possess reappeared, solid, present. And with it returned the effort and the intention and the small self. And the true music faded away. And what came out of the flute was once again a tense, controlled, ordinary sound. Kauro lowered the flute, frustrated, feeling the beauty he had held in his hands slip away just as he tried to grasp it. That afternoon, back at the hut, he told Bayan what had happened. "I had it," he said. For a long time, I played the real music. I disappeared, and the music flowed on its own, beautiful, full of soul. It was the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced. But then I wanted to hold on to it. I wanted to grasp that beauty, to make sure I could always do it. And as soon as I tried, it broke. It vanished. Why? Why does it slip away just when I try to hold on to it? Bayan nodded slowly, like someone acknowledging something very familiar. Because true music, he said, is born from your disappearance. And as soon as you try to hold on to it, grasp it, possess it, that desire brings back the self that wanted to disappear. The one who grasps, the one who holds on to, the one who possesses, is precisely the small self. And the instant that self returns to grasp beauty, the beauty that was born from its absence vanishes. It's a profound law, Karu, and difficult to accept. You can't possess what only exists when you're not there. You can't grasp with the hand of the self that which only blossoms when the self opens and lets go. It's like trying to catch the moon's reflection in the water. Look. The old man took a bowl, filled it with water, and placed it in the moonlight that streamed through the doorway. The moon was reflected on the water's surface, round and luminous. There's the moon in the water, he said. Beautiful, perfect, shining. Now try to grasp it. Try to hold it in your hand, to possess it. Khading. Kauru put her hand in the water, trying to catch the moon's reflection. But as soon as her hand touched the water, the surface rippled and churned, and the moon's reflection shattered into 1,000 trembling pieces and vanished. Kauru pulled her hand out and waited for the water to calm down. And when the water became still again, the moon reappeared in it, whole, beautiful, perfect. Do you see it? Said Bayan. The moon's reflection can only be in the water when the water is still. The moment you reach in to grasp it, you stir the water and the reflection vanishes. You cannot possess the moon in the water. You can only contemplate it when the water is still. And so is true music, and so is peace, and so is all the profound beauty of life. They cannot be grasped, possessed, or held. They can only be allowed to be when you are still enough, empty enough, free enough not to want to grasp them. The moment you reach out your ego to possess them, you destroy them, just as you destroyed the moon's reflection by dipping your hand in the water. So, Kauru said, disheartened, I'll never be able to have that music. Will it always elude me the moment I touch it? You can't have it, Bayan said gently, but you can be it. That's the difference. Don't possess it, be it. Don't try to grasp true music and keep it like a treasure that belongs to you. Simply, again and again, empty yourself, disappear and let it flow, without trying to hold on to it, without trying to possess it, letting it be born and letting it pass as you let each breath pass. Don't cling to anything, not even beauty, Kauru, not even peace, not even awakening, because the moment you cling to them, you lose them. Let everything flow, even the most beautiful, even the most sacred. And in that flowing without grasping, in that continuous letting go, you will find a freedom and a fullness far greater than any possession. He who has not swept the moon from the water can contemplate it every night, whole and beautiful. He who tries to grasp it is left only with the turbulent water and empty hands. Kauru remained silent, contemplating the moon's reflection, once again whole and serene in the bowl of still water, and understood that the last and most subtle of his attachments, more subtle even than attachment to fame or possessions, was attachment to his own beauty, his own peace, his own awakening, that even that which was most beautiful and most sought after had to be let go, allowed to flow, not grasped, and she understood that the path of emptying herself never ended, that there was always a more subtle attachment to release, a more hidden self to dissolve, and that freedom lay not in reaching an end, where there was nothing left to let go of, but in the letting go itself, continuous, infinite, serene, like the inexhaustible flow of a river that never stops, because it doesn't seek to reach any destination, but finds its fullness in the flow itself. But the path of emptying herself, like every true path, was not a straight line that climbed ceaselessly toward the light. It had its dark valleys, its long nights, its moments of despair, and the deepest of all came in the harshest part of that winter. Kaoru had tasted true music in the snowy forest. She had touched it, held it for a moment in her hands, and then lost it when she tried to grasp it. And from then on, though he understood the lesson of the moon's reflection with his mind, his heart could find no rest in it. He returned to the forest every day to play, longing to feel that true music again, that disappearance, that beauty. But that very longing, that desire to feel it again, was a subtle yearning, a grasping, and he closed the door. The more he sought to return to that state, the more it eluded him, and night after night, day after day, he sank deeper into despair. He had glimpsed paradise, and now he could not enter it again, and that was more painful than never having glimpsed it at all. One night, in the depths of winter, Kaoru's despair reached its lowest point. He lay in the hut, unable to sleep, and a dark voice spoke to him from within. "You'll never make it," it said. "You touched it once, by chance, but you can't repeat it, and you never will. You're not cut out for this. You've wasted a year on this mountain. You've lost your fame, your life in the city, everything, and for nothing. You're nothing but a poor fool chasing something that's out of your reach. Give up, go back to the city, or better yet, give up altogether, because there's no city to go back to, no fame, nothing. You are nothing, you never were anything, and you never will be anything." And Kaoru, in the darkness, felt that the voice was right, and a black despair, blacker than the winter night, enveloped him completely. He felt that all his effort had been in vain, that he was empty in the worst sense, a bottomless emptiness, without hope, without a way out. He got up in the middle of the night and left the hut into the freezing cold and walked aimlessly through the dark, snowy forest, lost in despair. And at some point, exhausted, he dropped to his knees in the snow, and there, alone, in the deepest part of the night and his despair, he surrendered. But he did not surrender as he had surrendered that afternoon, when his first true sound was born, with a serene surrender. She surrendered with a desperate, agonizing surrender, the surrender of someone who can take no more, who has lost everything, who renounces even hope. "I surrender," she said aloud, "to the night, to the snow, to no one. I can't. I'm incapable. I don't know how to disappear. I don't know how to empty myself. I don't know how to play true music. I've tried everything and I can't. I give up. Whatever will be, will be. I'm not looking for anything anymore. I don't want anything anymore. I can't want anything anymore." And the very instant he uttered those words, the instant he surrendered completely, the instant he relinquished even the yearning to achieve it, the instant he ceased to desire even to disappear, to hear true music, and to awaken, something opened within him for that yearning to achieve it. That desire for true music, that subtle grasp, had been the last and most hidden of his attachments, the last inner wall he had yet to breach. And now, in his utter despair, even that had been released. And as the last desire was released, as even the yearning to awaken surrendered, Kaoru was left, at last, completely empty. Empty even of the desire not to be empty. Empty even of hope. Hollow in every way, like bamboo. And in that total emptiness, kneeling in the snow, in the silent night, something happened. It wasn't a burst of light, nor a vision, nor an ecstasy. It was something much simpler and much deeper. It was that, suddenly, without seeking it, without wanting it, without expecting it, Kaoru realized she was at peace. A deep, serene, immense peace that depended on nothing, needed nothing, didn't have to be obtained or held onto, because it was simply there. It had always been there. Beneath all her searching and all her despair, he realized that the emptiness he had feared all his life, the emptiness he had tried to fill with fame and music, the emptiness into which he had now completely sunk by surrendering, was not an abyss of despair, but a space of peace, a profound silence, a luminous void from which, he suddenly understood, all beauty, all music, and all life were born. The emptiness was not his enemy. The emptiness was his home. The emptiness was the hollow bamboo through which the world's wind could finally sing. He knelt in the snow for a long time, enveloped in that peace he hadn't sought, and which had arrived just when he stopped looking for it. And when he finally got up and returned to the hut, walking slowly through the snowy forest under the stars, he was a different man. Something had broken within him that night, and something had been born. The last wall had been breached, the last resistance broken, and although he didn't fully understand it yet, although he still had much to learn and much to settle, that night of despair and surrender had, in reality, been the night of his awakening. The next morning, when Bayan saw him come out of the hut, he stopped and gazed at him for a long time, a deep emotion on his serene face. He saw something in Kaoru that he hadn't seen before. He saw peace in his eyes. He saw the stillness in his demeanor. He saw that the agitated, anxious, proud young man who had climbed the mountain a year ago was gone, and in his place stood a serene, empty, peaceful man. "Something has happened tonight," the old man said softly. "Wasn't that a question?" "Yes," Kaoru replied simply. "Last night I gave up completely. I let go of even the desire to achieve it. And when I no longer wanted anything, not even to wake up, I realized that I was already at peace, that the emptiness I feared was my home, that there was nothing to achieve because what I was looking for was already here and had always been here beneath all my searching." He paused, and a serene smile appeared on his lips, the first truly free smile of his life. "I'm not looking for anything anymore, Master. I don't need anything anymore. I am at peace, and I don't know how or why or if it will last, but for the first time in my life I am at peace." Bayan approached him and placed both hands on his shoulders and looked into his eyes with immense tenderness and joy. "It has arrived," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "What you came looking for without knowing what it was. The emptiness you feared has become your home. The partition has now been broken. The reed is hollow. Now, Kaoru, now the wind of the world can at last sing through you unhindered. Now your music will be true, not because you make it, but because you, at last, have disappeared enough to let it through. Go to the forest. Take your flute and play. Not to gain anything, not to hold on to anything, not to be anyone. Just play, empty and free, and let life sing through you, and you will finally hear the music you came to find. The music that only a heart that no longer needs anything can make." That winter morning, Kaoru took his bamboo flute, the one he had made himself, the one he had cut and hollowed out with his own hands, and walked alone to a clearing in the snowy forest. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east, turning a pale, delicate pink over the mountains. Snow covered the bent bamboo stalks, and everything was absolutely silent, that deep, sacred silence of winter dawn, when the whole world seems to hold its breath, waiting for the light. Kauru sat on a rock, breathed in the icy, pure air of dawn, and remained motionless for a moment, simply present, simply empty, seeking nothing, wanting nothing, at peace. He didn't think about playing true music. He didn't wish for his music to move anyone. He longed for nothing. He was simply there, sitting in the snowy forest, watching the day break, hollow and serene like the reed he held in his hands. And when he felt, without thinking, that the moment had come, he brought the flute to his lips, breathed in, and played. And what came from the flute was not the sound of Koru. It was the sound of dawn, the sound of snow on the bamboo, the sound of the silence from which all music is born, made audible for an instant. A single note, deep and pure, long and serene, rose in the cold morning air and spread through the snowy forest. And in it, there was everything. There was the stillness of winter and the promise of spring. There was the solitude of man and the company of the whole world. There was the pain of all that is lost and the peace of all that remains. There was life and death, and the luminous void from which both are born. Kauru didn't create it. Kauru had disappeared. Only her breath remained, passing through the hollow reed, and the hollow reed singing, and the whole world singing through the reed in that single note that asked for nothing, that didn't show off, that didn't seek admiration, but simply poured forth at dawn as light pours forth upon snow with pure and overflowing grace. Kauru played, dissolved, hollow, absent and present at once, letting the music flow through him like the wind through bamboo. One note, then another, then silence, then another note, unhurried, unplanned, unwilling, allowing himself to be touched by something much greater than himself. And that music, simple and profound, filled the snowy forest at dawn, and the reeds seemed to bend down to listen, and the silence of daybreak seemed to open up to receive it. And for an endless moment, the man and the flute and the forest and the snow and the dawn were one song, one breath of the world. What Kauru didn't know was that Bayan had silently followed him and was standing among the bamboo some distance away, listening. And the old man, who had heard every facet of music in his life, who had walked roads and squares playing his own flute for decades, who knew true music like few others in the world, remained motionless, listening to the music that flowed from Koru's flute in the snowy dawn. And Akko stirred in the depths of his serene heart, for in that music he heard, at last, what he had longed to hear. He heard a man who had vanished. He heard a true reed hollowed out. He heard the wind of the world singing unhindered through a heart that needed nothing more. He heard true music, born not of talent or technique, but of emptiness and surrender and selfless love. And old Bayan, who had seen and heard so many things in his long life, felt his eyes fill with tears and let them roll down his weathered cheeks without wiping them. Moved to his very core by that simple music that no man played alone, for no one, in the silence of a winter dawn. When Kauru finished playing and the last note faded into the air, merging with the silence from which it had sprung, he stood motionless for a moment, the flute still to his lips, enveloped in a profound peace. Then, very slowly, he lowered the flute, opened his eyes, and saw the old man standing among the bamboo stalks, his face bathed in tears. And he understood. He understood that his music, at last, had touched someone, not to a cheering crowd, not to nobles or the wealthy admiring his skill, but to a single wise old man in the silence of a snowy forest, an old man who wept not from admiration, but from something much deeper, recognition, communion, having been touched in his soul by true music. And Kauru knew, with a serene certainty that needed no one to confirm it, that he had finally found what he had climbed the mountain to seek. Not a technique, not a secret, not a power that would make him more admired, but the ability, born from emptiness, to let true music pass through him and touch the heart of whoever heard it. The two men gazed at each other across the snowy forest, saying nothing, because words were unnecessary. The master and the disciple, the old man who had waited and the young man who had arrived. And in that shared silence, in that gaze, there was an understanding deeper than any words. The understanding of two hearts that had met in the same bottomless place from which all music and all peace are born. "That's it," Bayan said finally, in a very low voice, drying his tears with a trembling smile. "You don't need anything more from me. What you came looking for, you've already found. Or rather, you've discovered that you always had it, and just had to empty yourself enough to let it bloom. You have learned to disappear. You have learned to be hollow. You have learned to let the wind of the world sing through you. And that music, Koru, the one you just played at dawn, that is your true music, the one you've always carried inside without knowing it, buried beneath all your technique and all your pride and all your fear. Now it's free. Now you are free. And the world, which so desperately needs beauty and peace, will be fortunate enough to receive your music, not as before to admire you, but now to be comforted, uplifted, touched to its very core by the breath of life that sings through a reed that at last, after so long a journey, has become truly hollow. The days that followed that dawn were, for Kauru, the most serene of his life. He no longer practiced with fervor, nor pursued anything, nor feared losing what he had found. He simply lived day after day in that profound peace that had sprung from his surrender. He rose with the dawn, played his flute whenever the urge arose, helped Bayan with the simple chores in the hut and the forest, ate his bowl of rice, listened to the wind in the bamboo, and fell asleep at nightfall with a calm heart. Nothing extraordinary, and yet everything had become luminous because he had finally understood the last and simplest of teachings. That awakening was not a special state separate from ordinary life, but ordinary life itself, lived with presence and without attachment. Sweeping the snow from the entrance was awakening. Lighting the fire was awakening. Drinking a bowl of cool water was awakening. Listening to the rustling of the bamboo was awakening. There was no need to go anywhere, reach any sublime state, or have any vision. There was only to be fully present, completely empty, fully surrendered to whatever life brought in each moment. When you are hungry, eat. When you are tired, sleep. And do everything with your whole being, without splitting yourself, without being absent, without wishing to be anywhere else. That, and nothing else, was the waking life. One afternoon, as the two silently watched the sunset over the forest, Kauru turned to his teacher. Before, he said, he believed that awakening would be something grand, a great light, a great truth, something that would tear him away from the ordinary world and take him to another place. And it turns out it's the opposite. It's a complete return to the ordinary world. It's this sunset, this silence, this bowl of tea cooling in my hands. I've never seen a sunset like this, Master. And yet, it's a sunset like any other. Bayan smiled, his eyes fixed on the sun sinking behind the mountains. That's the great secret that isn't a secret, he said. Before waking, one chops wood and carries water, dreaming of something higher. After waking, one chops wood and carries water. The same thing, yet everything is different, because now the wood is wood and the water is water. And chopping and carrying are all of life and all the peace of the universe, here, in this instant, with nothing lacking, nothing superfluous. You have traveled a long road, Karu, to discover that there was never anywhere to go, and that the peace you sought was, from the beginning, in the ground beneath your feet, in the air you breathed, in the teacup cooling in your hands. That is the end of the road, to discover that there was never a road, that you were always already home, and that you only had to open your eyes and empty your heart to see it. Karu nodded silently and drank his now cold tea, savoring it as if it were the most exquisite nectar, fully present in that simple act, completely at peace. And the sun finished setting, and the first stars appeared over the bamboo forest, and the two men remained seated together in the twilight, in a silence that contained everything, master and disciple, old and young, the one who had arrived and the one who would one day depart, united in the same bottomless peace from which all the music and all the silence of the world are born. Winter yielded, and spring returned to the bamboo forest. The snow melted, the bent reeds stood tall again, green and luminous, and the forest regained its ceaseless whisper, that music no one played, yet which had always been there. More than a year had passed since Kauru arrived on the mountain, and now, transformed, serene, empty, and free, he knew the time to leave was approaching. It wasn't a decision he had to make with difficulty. One day, gazing at the blossoming forest, she simply knew her time on the mountain was over, that she had learned what she needed to learn there, and that now it was time to return to the world and live what she had learned. It wasn't an escape, as her arrival had been in a way, an escape from her emptiness. It was a fullness that longed to overflow, a spring yearning to flow down to the valley. One morning, he sat beside Bayan by the fire, as he had done so many times before, and told him his decision. "Master," he said, "the time has come for me to come down from the mountain. I feel that my time here is over, not because I have nothing left to learn from you, for I know I could spend 1,000 years by your side and still continue learning, but because I feel that what I have received here now wants to flow into the world. I shouldn't keep it to myself, but share it with others, just as a spring doesn't hoard its water, but lets it flow down to the valley." Bayan nodded, unsurprised, with a serene smile. "I knew this day would come," he said, "and I'm glad you recognized it yourself. Yes, Karu, your time to leave has arrived. You have received what you came seeking, and now, as you say, that gift wants to flow to others. But tell me, what will you do when you come down from the mountain? Will you return to the city, to regain your fame, to play in the palaces of the nobles?" Kauru shook his head, and a deep peace settled on his face. "No," he said, "I will not seek fame again. That life is over for me, and I don't miss it. The fame, the applause, the admiration. I understand now that all of that was nothing more than an attempt to fill a void that couldn't be filled that way, and that I no longer need to fill, because I've made peace with it. I will no longer play to be admired." He paused and looked toward the bamboo grove. "I will do as you do, Master. I will become a wandering monk. I will travel the roads with my flute and my beggar's bowl, and I will play for whoever wants to listen. In village squares, at crossroads, in markets, wherever there are people who will grant us a moment of beauty and peace. I will not play to be admired, nor to receive anything, though I will gratefully accept any rice offered to me. I will play to give, to offer others what you have given me. A moment when their soul, touched by the sound, remembers something beautiful it had forgotten. I will play like one who gives water to the thirsty. That will be my life, my music, and my path. Bayan listened to those words with eyes shining with emotion and joy. I couldn't have wished anything better for you. That's the most beautiful path there is, the path of giving without asking, of offering one's music as a gift, of going through the world spreading beauty and peace without expecting anything in return. It's a humble, poor path, without honors or riches. You will sleep in the open many nights. You will go hungry some days. No one will know your name or remember your face, but you will be free, Kauru, free as few men are. And your music will touch more hearts than you ever touched in palaces, because it will reach the simple people, those who suffer, those who need comfort, those whom no one touches with beauty. And every heart you touch, every tear of emotion you stir, every moment of peace you give, will be a fruit of this bamboo forest and of your own heart, finally emptied and opened. Go, my boy, go out into the world and give what you have received. That is the ultimate meaning of everything you have learned here, not to keep it to yourself, but to give it away. The day of departure has arrived. Kauru gathered his few belongings, his bamboo flute, a beggar's bowl Bayan had given him, a straw hat to protect himself from the sun and rain, and little else. He stripped off the last of his fine clothes from his life in the city and put on a simple patched habit, like the old man's, and when he was ready, he stood before Bayan in the forest clearing to say goodbye. I don't know how to thank you for what you've done for me, Master, Kauru said, his voice thick with emotion. I came to this mountain an empty, proud, tormented man, begging for the admiration of others to numb my own nothingness. And I leave finally being myself, at peace, free, filled with a fullness that needs nothing. You gave me life, Master, true life, and words cannot express my gratitude. Bayan smiled and gently shook his head. You owe me nothing, Kauru, he said. I haven't given you anything you didn't already have. I've only helped you empty yourself of what was superfluous so you could find what you've always carried within. The teacher doesn't give anything to the student, only helps them discover what they already are. And as for thanking me, there's only one way, and it's the one you've already chosen. Go out into the world and give to others what you found. Every person you touch with your music, every heart you comfort, every moment of peace you give, will be your way of thanking me. And so, what I gave you, and what my own teacher gave me so long ago, and what his family gave him, will continue to flow from hand to hand, from heart to heart, from generation to generation, like the water of a spring that never ceases to flow. That is the only true immortality, Kauru. Not the fame that fades, but the gift that is passed on and that lives on in every heart that receives it and gives it in turn. The two men bowed to each other deeply, with a respect and love that needed no words. And then, without further ceremony, Kauru put on his straw hat, took his flute and bowl, and set off down the path that descended from the mountain into the bamboo forest toward the valley and the world. Before the path turned and the clearing where the hut stood disappeared from view, Kauru paused for a moment, raised his flute to his lips, and played one last note, long and deep and serene, as a farewell and as a thank you. And the note rose into the spring air and spread through the forest and reached the old man who watched him leave. And Bayan, hearing her, smiled and nodded slowly, whispering to himself with deep peace, "Go in good spirits, boy. Go and sing the song of the world." And Kauru lowered his flute and continued on his way, and the bamboo forest enveloped him with its ceaseless whisper, and little by little his figure faded among the green reeds until he disappeared like a note, merging with the silence from which it was born. And so began Karu's new life, his true life, the life of a wandering monk who travelled the roads with his bamboo flute and his beggar's bowl, giving his music to the world without asking for anything in return. Years passed, and Karu walked countless paths, crossed countless valleys and mountains, and passed through countless towns and villages. He had no home, no possessions, no fixed destination. He went wherever his steps took him, slept wherever night fell, ate what kind people offered him, and played his flute wherever there were ears to listen and hearts to comfort. No one recognized him anymore as the great Koru, the famous flautist of old. That name had been completely lost to the world's oblivion, and he didn't care at all. Now he was just an old mendicant monk with a straw hat covering his face. One more of those wandering musicians who roamed the roads without name, without fame, without importance. And in that anonymity, in that insignificance he had once so feared, he had paradoxically found the greatest freedom and the greatest fulfillment of his life. His music had changed as much as he had. He no longer played brilliant melodies or dazzling flourishes. He played simply, with long flowing notes punctuated by long silences, letting the breath of the world sing through his hollow reed. And that simple music had the power to touch the soul of the listener in a way his former virtuoso music never had. Because he asked for nothing, he only gave. And when people listened to her, they felt something they couldn't name, something that stirred them to their very core, something that made them stop and fall silent, and sometimes cry. And almost always, they left feeling a little lighter, a little more at peace, as if that music had reminded them of something they had forgotten, something beautiful and true that they carried within them without knowing it. Karu played for all kinds of people throughout her years on the road. He played for weary farmers returning from the fields at dusk, and his music eased the weight of the day. He played in bustling markets, and around him, people gradually fell silent, drawn in by a sound that seemed to come from another world. He once played for a woman who had just lost her child, sitting beside her in silence, then letting his flute weep with her the grief that words could not soothe. And the woman, listening to that music that accompanied her grief without trying to erase it, felt for the first time since her son's death that she was not alone. And she wept. And in that weeping, accompanied by the flute, she began, very timidly, to heal. He played at the bedside of a dying old man, whose family had called him to sweeten his final hours, and the old man, listening to that serene music, lost his fear of death and faded away peacefully, like a note gently melting into silence. He played for children who laughed and danced to the sound of his flute, for lovers who held hands, and for solitary travelers who shared a campfire with him at night. He played in joy and in sorrow, at birth and in death, in crowded squares and on empty roads. And in every place he played, he left behind a trail of beauty and peace. People didn't remember his name because he didn't give it. She didn't even remember his face, hidden beneath the straw hat. But she remembered the music. For years, in those towns and villages, people would talk about that old wandering monk who had spent a day playing a bamboo flute, and how his music had touched their souls and made them cry or smile or find peace. And even if they didn't know who he was, that music would live on in their memories, comforting them in their difficult times, reminding them of the beauty of the world. Long after the old musician had gone off on his journey, Karu was happy, with a deep and serene happiness that didn't depend on anything external. He had no riches, no fame, no honors, no house, not even a well-known name. But he had his flute and his music, the freedom of his own path, and the joy of giving, and above all, he had peace. That peace he had found on the winter night when he surrendered completely, and which had never left him, because it depended on nothing that could be taken from him. He was free like the moon that Bayan had wanted to give to the thief, impossible to uproot. He was hollow like bamboo, and through him the wind of the world sang, and every morning, upon waking in whatever corner the night had found him, he silently gave thanks for that new day, for the gift he had received on the mountain, and for the fortune of being able to share it with the world. From time to time, during his years of wandering, he would think of Bayan, of the bamboo forest, of the mountain where he had been reborn. He never knew for sure what had become of the old man, whether he was still alive up there playing his flute, or whether he had died peacefully in his hut, or whether he too had departed along the roads. But he always carried his teacher in his heart, not with painful longing, but with serene gratitude. And often, as he played, he felt that the music that flowed from his flute was also, in some way, the music of Bayan, and of Bayan's master, and of all those who, generation after generation, had emptied themselves to let the wind of the world sing through them. And he understood that he was just another link in that long chain of hollow hearts, another reed through which the timeless music of life passed on its way to the future. The years, however, spare no one, and Kuru too grew old. Her hair, once black, turned white. Her face, once smooth, became covered in wrinkles. Her back, once upright, began to hunch. Her steps along the paths grew slower and her days shorter. But her music, far from diminishing with age, became even deeper, more serene, more genuine. For each passing year emptied it a little more, drew it a little closer to the silence from which all sound is born. And so, now an old man with a white beard and straw hat, he continued wandering the roads, sharing his music with the world, until one day, without his seeking it, the circle of his life began to close, and the past came to meet him in the form of a young man, who approached him one afternoon, his heart filled with the same longing and the same emptiness with which he, so many years before, had climbed a mountain in search of a secret. It happened at a crossroads, at the entrance to a village, one autumn afternoon. The old man was sitting under a tree, playing his flute for passers-by, when he noticed a young man watching him from the side, a little apart, with an intense expression on his face. The young man wore the fine clothes of a city musician and carried a beautiful, polished, expensive flute, the kind made by the finest artisans, and in his eyes there was something that the old man recognized instantly, because he had seen it in his own gaze many years before. There was longing and pride, and a poorly disguised envy, and beneath it all, deeper still, a great and painful emptiness. When Kauro finished playing and the people dispersed, the young man approached him. "Old man," he said, in a tone that mingled respect with a certain haughtiness, "I've heard of you. They say you're a wise old monk who plays the bamboo flute, and that your music moves people to tears, touching their souls. I've come to hear you, and it's true. I've never heard anything like it. Your music has something mine doesn't, even though I'm far more technically skilled than you. I'm a musician, you know, and not just any musician. I'm considered the best flautist in the capital. I play in the palaces of nobles, and all admire my skill. But," and here the young man hesitated, and for a moment his pride crumbled, revealing the emptiness beneath. "But my music, though it astonishes, does not move. No one cries when they hear me. No one gets emotional. They just admire my skill. And I've come to you because I want to know your secret. I want to learn to play like you, to move people like you. I'll pay you whatever you ask. Just teach me your secret." The old Kauro listened to the young man, and a serene, profound smile, filled with infinite tenderness, spread across his wrinkled face. For in those words, he recognized himself completely. The proud, empty Kauro, who had climbed a mountain many years before, searching for a secret. It was like looking into a mirror of the past. The same pride, the same yearning, the same hidden emptiness, the same misguided search for a secret that wasn't a secret, for a power that couldn't be bought or taken away. And he understood that the circle was closing, that he, who had received so much from Bayan, now had before him the opportunity to give what he had received, to transmit to another heart the music that had been transmitted to him, that this proud and empty young man was, perhaps, the disciple that life was sending him to continue the chain, so that the gift would keep flowing from hand to hand, from generation to generation, like the water of a spring that never ceases to flow. "There is no secret to teach, boy," said the old Kauro with the same words, almost exact, that Bayan had said to him so many years before. "And even if there were, it is not something that can be bought with gold, nor learned like one learns a melody. What you're looking for isn't a technique. You already have all the techniques in the world, you say, and they haven't worked for you. What you're looking for is something else, and that something else can't be added on. It comes off." The young man frowned, puzzled, just as Kauro had been puzzled by those same words back then. "It comes off?" he asked. "I don't understand you." "Come," said the old Kauro, pointing to a bamboo growing by the side of the road. "Look at that bamboo stalk. Tell me, why does bamboo rustle when the wind passes through it, but a solid wooden stick doesn't?" The young man looked at the bamboo, confused. "Because bamboo is hollow inside," he replied. "It has an empty channel through which the air passes." "Exactly," said the old Kauro, and his smile widened. "Bamboo makes a sound because it is hollow. It is its inner emptiness that allows it to sing. Music doesn't live in the solid part of the bamboo, but in the hollow, in the emptiness that runs through it. And so it is with you, my boy. You are full, filled with your technique, your fame, your pride, your thirst for admiration. You are so full, so solid inside, that the breath of life cannot pass through you and become true music. That is why you amaze, but you do not move. To move, to touch the soul, you have to empty yourself. You have to become hollow like bamboo. You have to let go of your pride, your longing, your fear, all that fills you and closes you off, until there is an empty space inside you, through which the music of the world can finally pass and sing. That's the secret you seek, though it's not a secret you can possess. And it's not learned, it's unlearned. It's not filled, it's emptied. That's the whole journey, and it's a lifelong journey." The young man listened, and on his face a battle raged between the pride that resisted those strange words and something deeper, that secret emptiness that recognized in them a truth he had long sensed but dared not look upon. And old Kauro, seeing that battle, recognized it too, for he himself had fought it, and he knew that beneath the pride, the young man had a heart capable of awakening. "If you truly want to learn," the old man said gently, "not what you think you want to learn, but what you truly need, then leave everything and come with me. I won't teach you, because there's nothing I can give you that you don't already have. But I will show you the path of emptying yourself, as my teacher showed it to me so long ago. And perhaps, if you have the necessary patience and humility, one day, when you least expect it, you will discover that the true music you were seeking was always within you, buried beneath everything that filled you. waiting only for you to empty yourself enough to let it emerge. But you must know, my boy, that this path will bring you no more fame, no more admiration, no more riches. On the contrary, it will take them all away. It will only give you one thing, the only thing that truly matters, the one I found that has filled my life with a peace that no applause ever gave me. Are you willing to lose everything to find it? The young man looked at the old monk with a white beard and straw hat, sitting under the tree with his humble bamboo flute, serene, free, at peace, with nothing and with everything. And he looked at his own expensive polished flute and his fine clothes and thought of his fame in the capital, the applause, the admiration, and the emptiness that none of it could fill. And something in his heart, weary of his constant begging, secretly yearning for a peace he did not know, inclined toward the path the old man offered him. And so, as so many times before in the long chain of emptying hearts, a new disciple began to walk in the footsteps of a master toward the most difficult and most beautiful learning of all, the lesson of disappearing, of becoming hollow, of letting the wind of the world sing through oneself. The circle closed, and as it closed, it opened again toward the future, toward another heart, toward another life that would be transformed as Koru's had been transformed, and as Vayana's had been before hers, and as so many others before them had been, in a chain without beginning or end, that stretched into the night of time and extended toward the dawn of those yet to come. And old Koru, watching his new disciple walk ahead of him down the path, and knowing that his own life was serenely approaching its end, felt a deep peace and a quiet joy. He had received and he had given. He had been filled with emptiness and had emptied another to fill him. He had been a hollow reed through which the wind of the world had sung, and now he was handing the song over to another reed that was beginning to empty. His task was accomplished, and when the day came to merge like a final note with the great silence from which all things are born, and to which all things return, he would merge peacefully, without fear, without attachment, without anything to hold on to, hollow and free until the end, like bamboo, like the moon, like the wind that blows through the reeds and keeps blowing when the reeds are gone. And here, at this serene point on the path, we can let rest the story of Kauru, the musician who had everything and felt empty, and who had to lose everything to discover that the emptiness he so feared was, in reality, the wellspring from which all the beauty of his life flowed. Think, before sleep completely envelops you, about the path that man traveled. He arrived at the mountain filled to the brim like an overflowing bowl that couldn't hold another drop, full of pride, of fame, of technique, of the certainty of being the best, and above all, filled with a desperate need to be admired, to be seen, to matter. And all that he believed to be his treasure was in reality what kept him imprisoned and empty inside. He had to learn little by little, with infinite patience, to empty his cup. He had to bore through, one by one, the inner partitions that divided and closed him off, just as he had pierced the nodes of the bamboo cane to make his flute. He had to learn to listen before playing, to disappear before sounding, to surrender before finding. And only when he was finally truly hollow, truly empty of himself, could the breath of life pass freely through him and become true music. That music that doesn't ask but gives, that doesn't show off but consoles, that doesn't seek admiration but touches the soul. Remember the hollow bamboo that is the heart of this story. Bamboo makes a sound because it is hollow inside. If it were solid and full, it couldn't sing no matter how much you blew into it. It's its hollowness, its inner emptiness, that allows it to become a flute, an instrument, music. And so it is with us, with your heart and mine. We live, constantly filling ourselves with possessions, desires, worries, opinions, the need to be something, to prove something, to achieve something, to be admired and recognized. We fill ourselves so much that there's barely an empty space left inside us for life to pass through and sing. And that's why, often, even when we have everything, we feel empty in the worst sense, truly hollow, shiny shells without music inside. But there is another emptiness, the good emptiness, the emptiness of bamboo, that clean and serene space that remains when we let go of everything that is superfluous, and which is not a lack but a fullness, not an absence but a presence, not an abyss but a horror. And from that emptiness, and only from that, all that is truly beautiful in life is born. Tonight, as you prepare to rest, perhaps you can very gently, without any effort, do a little of what Koru learned to do. You can begin to empty your cup. You don't have to solve anything, achieve anything, or get anywhere. You just have to let go, little by little, of everything you've been carrying during the day. Let go of the worries you've accumulated. Let go of the things left undone, the things that went wrong, and the things you fear will go wrong tomorrow. Let go of the need to be something, to prove something, to measure up. Let go, even if only for tonight, of the weight of having to be someone, and simply be with yourself, empty and serene, like a hollow reed, in which there is nothing left to hinder, nothing to defend, nothing to hold back. Feel your breath entering and leaving your body, soft and serene, without you having to do anything to breathe. The air enters and leaves on its own, like the wind that blows through the bamboo in the forest. You don't breathe. The breath breathes you. And with each exhalation, let something loose a little more. Let your shoulders loosen. Let your jaw relax. Let your forehead soften. Let your whole body become heavy and soft and loose, sinking little by little into the bed that, hold on like snow gently settling on the forest reeds in the winter silence, and thoughts, worries, images of the day pass through your mind. Don't fight them. Don't be angry with yourself for not being able to silence them. Let them pass as the old Karo learned to let the notes and silences pass without clinging to either. Let each thought come and stay for a moment and go like a leaf falling into the water and being gently carried by the current. You don't have to do anything with them. You don't have to resolve them or chase them away. Just let them flow and return again and again, gently to your breath, to the soft weight of your body, to the stillness of the night, to the deep silence from which all rest is born. Listen, if you will, to the silence that surrounds you, not silence as the absence of sound, but full silence, the living silence of which Bayan spoke. That silence that is always there behind all the noises, among all the sounds, sustaining everything. It is the same silence of the bamboo forest at dawn, the same silence from which Karo's music was born, the same silence from which everything is born, and to which everything returns. Resting in that silence is also within you, deep beneath all the noise of your thoughts and worries. And tonight, as you let go and empty yourself, you can gently sink into it and rest in it, as one rests in the lap of something immense and serene that embraces you without asking anything of you. I also remember the freedom of the old man, who gave his clothes to the thief and lamented not being able to give him the moon. That freedom of not clinging to anything, of not fearing to lose anything, is also a gift you can begin to give yourself tonight for a few hours while you sleep. You don't have to cling to anything. You don't have to hold up the world. You don't have to protect anything or achieve anything or be anyone. You can let go of everything, surrender completely to rest. Let sleep carry you like the current carries a leaf, trusting that the world will keep turning without you holding it up. that the spring will keep flowing, that the sun will rise again tomorrow, without you having to do anything to make it rise. Let it all go. You don't need to carry anything tonight. Let your hands, your mind, and your heart open and empty themselves. Rest. You are in this moment like hollow bamboo, empty of the day's tensions, empty of worries, empty of the need to be something. And in that serene emptiness, the soft breath of the night passes through you and rocks you and sings you a silent lullaby, the lullaby of the wind in the reeds, the lullaby of the flowing water, the lullaby of the deep silence from which all rest is born. You don't have to do anything more. You are already where you need to be. You are already enough just as you are, without achieving anything, without proving anything, without being admired by anyone, enough and whole like a bamboo stalk, like a drop of water, like a note that melts into the silence. Let your breath grow slower and slower, softer and deeper. Let your body sink deeper and deeper into rest. Let your mind grow stiller and stiller until thoughts space out and become slower and fainter. And between them, silences open up, ever wider and more peaceful, like the silences between the notes of Koru's flute. And in those ever-deepening silences, let May's sleep receive you gently, without haste, without effort, as the forest receives the fall of night, as silence receives the last note that fades away. Rest now, let go now. Empty yourself now gently of all that you do not need to carry with you to sleep, and let yourself be carried lightly and freely to a deep and restorative rest, lulled by the imagined whisper of the wind through the bamboo, to a tranquil sleep from which you will awaken tomorrow renewed and at peace. May you rest. May you sleep soundly. May the silence from which all music is born cradle you tonight in its serene arms.